What's up, everybody? I am back for another edition of Barely Qualified Picks. We are here to talk about the Week 16 slate in the NFL. It was an incredible slate. We went into Week 16 with 2 teams having locked up playoff berths. We exited Week 16 with 10 teams locked up in the playoffs. I've got my man Nate here. We are going to talk about the Week 16 big headlines, and then we're going to take a look ahead to Week 17, as this is going to be an incredibly pivotal week, clarifying the playoff picture in both the AFC and the NFC for the 4 spots that remain. Nate, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's always a great time being able to chop it up, talk football. It's the holiday season. Christmas is right around the corner. And I'm doing great.
I love this time of year. At the same time, I also feel the end of the NFL season a little bit. And there's just this part of me that dies at the end of the NFL season. Like, I love basketball. I love everything that happens throughout the rest of the year. But there is nothing quite like the NFL. And we are being treated to a really incredible NFL season this year. I got 4 things that I want to talk about. I'm going to let you kind of Jeopardy style pick where we go on the board. But the 4 big topics are: who would you put $1,000 on today if you had to back one of the contenders in the AFC? And I've got 6 choices for you with the odds. The
Okay.
second question I have, and it's tied to the first: what do you think about the news of this day-to-day Josh Allen foot injury? Feet are very important for any quarterback, especially for a quarterback as mobile as Josh Allen. I think that this is one that, could turn into being something bigger than it seems at first. Third question is about the NFC North. We saw a lot of movement in the NFC North last week. Not only did Green Bay lose, but they lost Jordan Love. Is he going to come back in Week 17? And then we also saw Detroit lose. And I want to talk about Detroit. It has obviously been a tough year for the Detroit Lions and their fans. How much of that is injury attrition, second most injured team in the league? How much of that is replacing both an offensive and a defensive coordinator in Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn? And do you think that they can win out over these last 2 games and get lucky enough that Green Bay loses out and they can still sneak into the playoffs? And then the fourth thing, we're both Seahawk fans. I want to talk about Week 18 because we just had one of the most incredible Seahawks games I have ever watched on Thursday night. The Seahawks were 0-171 in games where they trailed by 15 points or more in the fourth quarter. They found a way to pull it out, and that game was for pole position in the NFC. Seahawks have pole position, but assuming they go win at Carolina, which is, no light assumption to make, then they've got to go to San Francisco for Week 18, which, if San Francisco beats the Bears at home this weekend, we're talking about a battle for all the regular season marbles, not just for the NFC West title, but for the 1 seed in the NFC, all up, and home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. So, 4 big topics. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the AFC and who you think are the 6 options to who's going to take it away. Now, when you say win the AFC, are you talking about win the AFC regular season title, or are you saying win the AFC championship and go on to the Super Bowl?
I'm talking about go on to represent the AFC against whomever comes out of the NFC in the Super Bowl, right? I
Okay.
think it's interesting. This year is the first year that we don't have Kansas City in the mix. And so, whether Kansas City, made it to the AFC championship game, they have generally done that, like I think 6 years in a row. Whether they won the AFC championship and went to the Super Bowl or not, every year we started with Kansas City as a prohibitive favorite to win the AFC. And the questions were, could Lamar challenge Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs? Could Josh Allen finally get over the hump and defeat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs? Well, now it looks like there's not going to be a Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, or a Joe Burrow in the playoffs, or potentially a Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. That light is fading fast for Baltimore. And so I think this is the first year, when you look at the field with no Mahomes, it opened the door for somebody else to be the prohibitive favorite. That was Denver for several weeks, but I think, I wasn't the only voice that said, I love Bo Nix as a Duck fan. I think what the Denver defense is doing is special, but are they really the clear-cut leader in the AFC? I wasn't so sure. And now you've seen Denver drop a couple, and all of a sudden, I think there's a real question. Is it Denver? If you're going to put your money on anybody in the AFC, is it Denver? They have the best odds at plus 370. Would you put it on the Pats? The Pats, I think, there are almost a lock to win the AFC East at this point. They're only a game up on the Bills, but they own the division record tiebreaker, and they close with the Jets and then the Dolphins. It's hard for me to see a situation where Mike Vrabel and the Pats give that back. So that means the Pats, in theory, are the real challenger to the 1 seed for the Broncos. But could it be the Jaguars? We just saw the Jaguars crush Denver in Denver, 34-20. They're plus 500, just behind the Bills, who are plus 400. So, even though the Bills are essentially locked into the 5 seed, the assumption in Vegas is that they have the third best chance to actually go represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. And then the two kind of flyers I'll throw in there for you are the Chargers at plus 750 and the Texans at plus 650. So obviously odds matter. You want to get a good return, but you also, you want to put your money somewhere that you think it can actually pay off. Which of those 6 teams would you back with $1,000 today?
$1,000 in my pocket. Which team am I backing? I think there's a lot that goes into it. And again, like you mentioned, the divisions in the AFC are interesting this year. You've got Cincinnati with Joe Burrow, their issues, they're out of the conversation. A team that you would normally be scared of this time of year, ramping up and getting hot. Kansas City, they're out of the mix. Lamar Jackson, now he's not healthy. Are the Ravens even going to be in the playoffs? That's entirely different. And then the Buffalo Bills, they're an 11-4 team. They're a very good team this year, but when they've played poorly, they've looked really bad.
Really bad.
A lot of different holes, both offensively and defensively. I think more so on defense than anything. To me, right now, if you're looking at a team that's going to come out of the AFC, I think it's going to be Houston.
Wow.
Believe it or not, yeah, I think it's Houston. I think that
I don't hate that pick. I just wish that you would have made that pick 8 weeks ago. I remember when they were 2-5, and in my first power rankings, this is embarrassing, just flat embarrassing, because it was a bad take. I said I didn't think the Texans could come back at 2-5. Stroud had just gotten injured. Davis Mills was going to be in for multiple. We thought Stroud's concussion was going to be 1 or 2 games. It ended up being 3 games. But I think you're right. I mean, I think they have the best defense in the league, and this offense is rounding into form. As long as Woody Marks stays healthy, they can run the ball. And we know that they have playmakers on the outside who can give Stroud opportunities to stretch the field. I don't hate that at plus 650.
And what I love about the pick is what you've already mentioned is the defense. And that entire defense has taken on the personality of D'Amico Ryans. Absolute psycho. So it doesn't matter rain, sleet, or shine. They're going to come up and get after the quarterback. They're going to play hard and physical over the middle, take away what a lot of football has become, right? Dink and dunk. We're chasing. We're throwing drags over the middle. Everything is like a flood or a, what do you want to call it? Where are my words at? You think you'd play a college receiver, there'd be some more words in your repertoire. A lot of different pick plays and rubs. Like that's kind of what it is right now, getting the ball out quick. And they play those so aggressively, and they dare you to throw it over the top. But to throw it over to the top, you got to give your quarterback time to get back and do his drop, and for the receivers to get downfield. They're not giving you time to do that. So you have to put together these really strong, physical, methodical drives to beat the Texans. So that shortens the game, number 1. Number 2, C.J. Stroud being hurt for part of the year did more damage than people realize. 1, because obviously Davis Mills, I don't think, is the caliber of C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud had a little bit of a sophomore slump.
Credit to Davis Mills.
Year.
He performed so much better than I ever expected.
He did. But what I think people are missing is Bobby Slowick, the guy who came in as offensive coordinator with C.J. Stroud, kind of shepherding him through that first and second year. Now you've got Nick Caley, the offensive coordinator. I believe he came from the Rams. So there's a little bit of a different offensive scheme for him to understand. He's injured for part of the year, doesn't get to practice that. And you just mentioned it. They're starting to round the corner on that offensive side, figure out how they want to play the game offensively. Not just, hey, we've got plays on a play sheet, let's call them, but in what order do we want to call these? Where do we want to be situated in that middle quarter at the end of with the 8 minutes left in the second quarter, in that beginning part of the third quarter? Where do we want to be positioned? So I think all of those things are starting to get figured out, which is why I think they're a team that's trending up. And I think they're pretty healthy. You've got Alshire, you've got Will Anderson, you've got who's the other pass rusher, that Daniil Hunter. Like that's scary.
Yeah. And you have a true lockdown corner in Derek Stingley Jr. There aren't a lot of teams, even
he might
good.
Be the best corner in the NFL. Sorry, Pat Surtain, best corner in the NFL. Right? But Stingley's right up there. I don't think he quite has the size and physicality, certainly that Pat Surtain does. But he's going to make your top wideout very uncomfortable.
Very. And I think that that's going to matter in the playoffs. Now, you mentioned that you think they can go play anywhere. That would be my one question about Houston. Houston, obviously, warm weather city, but they play in a dome. Do you have any worry if it ends up being the Pats that get the 1 seed and the seeding shakes out that Houston's got to go to New England for a cold weather game or has got to go to Denver for a cold weather game, that they're going to be at a disadvantage as a dome team?
I think even the teams that play in that poor weather regularly still have to endure those conditions. That ball is still rock hard. Your hands are still ice cold, and you have to figure out a way to get past those mental blockers of everything else going on and go out and put together a good game. So I don't think that kind of weather matters as much. Now, again, AFC Championship in Arrowhead, probably a little bit different. AFC Championship in Highmark, probably a little bit different. But outside of those two locations, I'm not really sure the Texans have to be worried about going anywhere else. You'd say maybe Pittsburgh, but I don't think Pittsburgh's going to be there. Maybe Gillette Stadium. I still don't quite have the full faith in the Patriots this year, given their schedule. And I know, and I know a lot of people are knocking them on their strength of schedule and who they beat, but you can't apologize for wins in the NFL.
No.
It might have been Ben Johnson saying we don't apologize for wins. So you got to tip the cap and look at the way they've absolutely turned things around in literally 1 year. It's impressive what Vrabel's doing. But yeah, 2 green.
I just think, you've got to make a playoff run or two before you're ready to go all the way to win a Super Bowl. I really can't think of a player that did it without at least 1 or 2 runs. So let me ask you one question. What do you think of the Jags? Because I think, a lot of people, myself included, have been skeptical of Jacksonville, to say the least. They had a midseason lull, but since then, the defense has picked back up. It's the second best run defense in the league. It is number 2 in terms of takeaways, and it's giving Trevor Lawrence a lot of opportunities to shine. And credit to Trevor Lawrence, it took 5 years, but I think this year he finally looks like the guy, the next Andrew Luck that he was touted as coming out of Clemson.
Yeah, I think all those things are true. And part of the tough part for Trevor Lawrence getting into the league, first you get Urban Meyer. And everyone thought that was, a match made in heaven. You draft Travis Etienne Jr., not your roommate, but your college mate at Clemson. You think things are going to be fantastic. Obviously not. Then you move on to Doug Peterson, who hasn't evolved his offense since winning the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. That certainly didn't help his playmaking ability either. And now you have a guy who's Liam Cohen. He seems like he's a guy's guy. He's invested specifically in the quarterback position while being head coach, and he is bringing him along in his ability to be craftier at the line of scrimmage pre-snap, to be more intelligent about how he's escaping the pocket and finding ways to make plays downfield after. The receiving core, I feel like, is starting to polish itself out with Brian Thomas Jr., who had a weird midseason. People talking like
He really did.
Traded. Parker Washington also obviously had a great game the other night. But I look at the losses that they've had: Seattle, the Rams, and Houston. All playoff teams. 2 teams top of the NFC, 1 team near the top of the AFC. Those are, I mean, good losses is always a funny thing to say, but
Right.
quality losses. And then I can't remember who it was early, but they lost to somebody early, and it's kind of hard to mark some of those games early in the season. Teams attrition, they change a lot throughout the course of the year. But I like where they're at. I just don't like any of their wins outside of Denver. But they really showed up in Denver, and that's impressive. Being able to score that many points against arguably the second, third best defense in the league, right up there with Seattle and Houston, extremely impressive. And for Trevor Lawrence to play with the confidence that he's playing with, like, he's letting the ball rip. It seemed like in previous years past, he was trying to kind of touch the ball in and around to different areas. But Liam Cohen has him absolutely rifling the ball. You see the strength of his arm. You see his ability to make reads. And we saw this, right? His ability to put the ball in a location several times a game over the past 5 years. You're like, well, yeah, no wonder this dude was the number 1 overall pick. But he couldn't do it consistently. But now he's got turnovers down, which is the biggest thing. And he's just letting it fly with an extreme level of confidence. And it's impressive to see.
And he's using his legs again. That's a big thing. There were a couple years in there where, as a fantasy owner, I loved it because Trevor Lawrence wasn't necessarily the most efficient passer, but he was going to use his legs consistently. He's using them more, but he's using them in very intelligent ways and, very situationally and moving the chains as a result. It's funny. I'm going to go with the Jaguars at plus 500, and I feel a little weird picking them just because I have a little bit of skepticism, but I can't deny, to your point, I was going to bring up the losses. You can't deny that they've been competitive in those games. They've beaten several playoff teams, and I think, if as long as they don't have to travel to a cold weather situation, they're going to be okay. And even if they do have to, I think they have the power running game with ATN. They need to get Bachel Tootin back, because I don't think you can overstate how great he's been subbing in for Etienne and keeping him healthy. But to your point on the wide receivers, now you're talking about one of the most potent wide receiver cores in football with Brian Thomas Jr. and Jacoby Myers and Parker Washington. If they get Travis Hunter back, that's potentially another weapon. They have Brenton Strange at tight end, who's a very, very physical and athletic tight end that can go across the middle. They can play a lot of different ways. And I know that I'm a little bit influenced because I was a Jaguars fan when they first came into the league. I grew up a University of Washington fan. So when Mark Brunell went there, I was like, well, that's my second team. The Seahawks sucked. And then, of course, the Jaguars in their first year in the league make a run to the AFC Championship game. Actually, a lot of people forget the Jaguars and the Panthers both came into the league at the same time, and they both made their conference championship games in their rookie years, which is actually pretty incredible when you think about it from an expansion standpoint. But yeah, I think it's the odds for me. Do I think the Jaguars are most likely? No. Do I have real questions about some of the matchups that they could see? Yes. But at 5-1, I don't think that the Broncos, we saw what they did to the Broncos. I don't think that they're scared of going back into Denver. I don't think anybody's scared of New England. I think especially the Jags, who, Drake May wants to throw the ball deep. The Jags want you to throw the ball deep. The Jags and the Bears, they're going to bend a lot in the passing game, but they're also going to snag the ball a few times. And, you know how important the turnover battle is. So, yeah, I think if I'm putting my money anywhere right now, I am a little hesitantly putting it behind the Jags, but I'm eyeing your Texans bet and thinking about following that too, because I think both teams are really well positioned for this playoff run.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we don't trust Denver because I'm not sure we entirely trust Bo Nix. He's had some incredible fourth quarter plays and comebacks, but when you get to the playoffs, like we were talking about kind of shortening some possessions, we were talking about University of Oregon before we got things going. You shorten the game in the second half. You're not going to have time to come back. You're not going to get 4 or 5 possessions in one quarter, or even really in the last 2 quarters of the game. So that's going to be something for them to watch. New England really wanted to trust you, but as soon as you gave it up, you had the opportunity to put the Bills away and say, hey, we're the commander-in-chief of this AFC East division, and you couldn't do it. And that was all I needed to know. Okay, so the Bills are going to be there, but I do think the Texans, and we saw what the Texans did to the Bills. Absolutely obliterated. I think it might have been 8 or 9 sacks in one game. No, they do not in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to the Texans. But I see what you're saying, Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's a perfect segue into the second topic, which is this Josh Allen foot injury. Day-to-day foot injury, suffered it in the game. He obviously finished the game last week, but I would have picked Buffalo at plus 400. I've been on the Buffalo bandwagon this year. I think Josh Allen is a generational player. I see the same things you do. They not only lack a true wide receiver 1, they lack even a wide receiver 2, really. Shakir is their best wide receiver, and that's not going to get it done. They have a really good running back in James Cook, but the offensive line, to your point, has been good, not great this year, and it's put all of the weight on Josh Allen's shoulders and on the shoulders of Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox at the tight end position, and it feels like that could potentially short circuit in the playoffs. I'm more concerned with Allen, though, because how does Allen make all of those subpar tools useful to him? It's all the time that he buys in the pocket. It's his ability to take hits. And if your foot is hurting and you can't move, like you just lose even a quarter of a step, he's a big dude, but I don't know. I think that could be a real problem. I would be much less concerned if it was even an injury, even a bruised throwing hand or something like that. Like an injured foot without knowing more about it feels like it could be a real hurdle for the Bills to overcome in these last couple of weeks, and then be, ready to be full Bills and full Josh Allen in the playoffs.
Yeah, you got to hope that you can continue to lean on James Cook in that run game to take all of that pressure off. And we saw that in the last game, right? James Cook was able to take on a huge load, having a fantastic game. But can you do that against Philadelphia? I'm not really sure that that's the case. And then you've got that soft kind of patsy game with the Jets up next, but you really need to win both of these games to set yourself up for success in the playoffs and potentially even make the playoffs as that wild card team, especially if you drop a game, right? Because then you're going to have New England, they're going to end up taking it away. So the concern is huge for Josh Allen because, like you're mentioning, his ability to make plays outside of the structure and to be able to make Shakir work and be able to make Ray Davis and James Cook and Ty Johnson, to make those kind of guys work. And not having Keon Coleman develop whatsoever this year, this is
just crazy,
really
right?
tough.
When he was at Florida State, I thought he's going to be a guy. I thought he would develop. You look at Tetaroa McMillan coming out of Arizona, very similar, these two guys.
Very
and Tetaroa McMillan has figured it out in year one, and we're still waiting on Coleman.
Yeah, and I think you look at the difference in head coaches, right? You look at Dave Canales, who was in Tampa Bay, part of that Baker Mayfield resurgence. He's been around Mike Evans. He's been around Chris Godwin, some guys that he's seen grow and develop. And so you bring him into Carolina, he can teach that, hey, this is how Mike did it. This is how Chris did it. And on the flip side, who on offense has ever developed anybody in Josh Allen's tenure?
Nobody.
They got good when they brought in Stephon Diggs, who was already developed, right? And then the whole entire offense was running through him. You had Josh Allen, and again, he got developed, but he got developed by Dayball. Dayball, exits, has his whole deal in New York. But where has been the development of the offensive players and weaponry the same way that the defense has developed in Josh Allen's tenure? Like you said, hired guns. They just haven't had that full-fledged development of these players that they're drafting on the offensive side of the football. James Cook, I think you could argue he was developed, but really he just fumbled a little bit less, and he's such an incredible athlete. He was gonna figure it out, right? And I think that's part of what spells the problems with the Bills. The defense doesn't show up when it's needed, and the offense. And now you're paying Josh so much money. God, he's so handsome too. He just can't. He's just got nothing to work with.
No, he really doesn't.
You draft somebody and develop them.
And we saw that with the Seahawks. Once Russell Wilson got his big contract, everything changed because they couldn't pay the Chris Clemens and the Cam Chancellors and the Brandon Browners even on the defense like they could when he was on a rookie contract. And to your point, you look at what happens when you do pay guys like that. Go look at Cincinnati. Look how depleted that defense is. Well, that's what happens when you pay Burrow a max contract and then you have to give another one to Jamar Chase and another one to T. Higgins. It does get tough.
That was beyond me, to spend that much money on three guys and just say, hey, we're
right?
gonna outscore you. That just you can't do that. And Joe Burrow has saved Zach Taylor's job. He did the moment he stepped in the building. I think that there needs to be change there, and I'm not sure how much time reaching a Super Bowl and getting to the divisional round a couple of years ago, how much time that's bought. We're getting off topic, but yeah.
No,
Zach Taylor's got to go.
It's great. You want to come back to the Bills, and right now it looks like they're going to play the Chargers in the first round if everything holds, which I think is like the Texans light, and so that's scary for the Bills. I think even that first round matchup could be tough. But let me ask you a question about Joe Burrow. Obviously, he has voiced his displeasure. He had a couple of really rough games. They got shut out by the Ravens 26-0 a couple of weeks ago, but then did come back with a big game in Miami. That said, if push comes to shove, do you think Joe Burrow is in Cincinnati again next year? It's not like Cincinnati is a good franchise. Everybody knows they're one of the most poorly run franchises. They are consistently under the cap at the end of the year. Weirdly, they did pay his top two receivers, but they don't seem to know how to put together championship caliber teams. Can you see a world where Joe Burrow gets traded in this offseason?
No, and I don't think that anybody can afford to have him on the roster once you trade for him. And then you have to mortgage the future to trade for him. So you're either giving up an excellent player plus picks, or you're just giving up every pick you've ever had for the rest of your life. And then you're going to be in the same situation that Cincinnati's in now. You've got an extremely expensive quarterback, and you don't have draft capital and assets to build around. So unless you are a team where the roster is so unbelievable that if you don't get him in 1 year and win it all, essentially like a Matt Stafford situation, but Matt Stafford wasn't nearly as expensive, then I don't see anybody taking that step to trade for him.
So you hit on the
It'd
first
be
question.
interesting.
I was going to ask you the two locations that seem like they could work in terms of dollars would be the Rams trading Stafford after the year. You know, he obviously came into the year, wasn't even sure he wanted to play football again, and now he is a leading MVP candidate. And so, what if you swapped Stafford and a one for Burrow? Or what if you did that in Miami? And he goes to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane and that, you know, revamped power run game, and Miami trades Tua and a one, allows Cincinnati to get off the big quarterback contract sooner. They've got to suffer through a couple of years of Tua, obviously, but and I know it's a stretch, but you think it's possible at all?
Huge, huge, huge stretch for both of those. Why would I want a 90-year-old Matt Stafford, as great as he's slinging the ball this year, could be the MVP candidate, and a first round pick? Because that does nothing for my future. If I'm trading away Joe Burrow, it is because I'm saying we need to reset some things. So I need picks and assets and something to move us forward. Tua maybe makes a little bit more sense, but again, incredibly expensive, right? And only getting a first round pick out of it, I don't love where my team is at sitting in a hole. Because if Tua goes to Cincinnati, there's going to be an expectation that maybe he revives his career with Zach Taylor. Maybe
Well,
this
we both
offense
know
can
what'll
go
really
back to him.
happen. They'll lose a
Right,
lot, and then they'll get
you're
another
going,
number one.
and then there's the whole cold weather to a guy can't throw the ball in weather under 60 degrees. And so
Yeah, that's a
while the
problem.
money might work, I mean, if I'm Cincinnati, I'm asking for nothing short of 4 picks. Whatever, I can't remember how much the Packers paid for Micah Parsons. Double it and then some.
Yeah,
And that's what I
yeah.
want for Joseph Burrow.
That's fair. Which, hey, you know, pour one out for Micah Parsons. That's a tough loss.
That's
And we can
brutal.
go that direction. Do you want to talk the NFC North next, or do you want to talk the NFC West in this looming Seattle San Francisco matchup?
Let's go north first. Let's go north.
Okay.
There's a little more
Uh,
there.
I mean, talk about an upside down year in the North, where the Bears, for the first time since 2018, look like they are positioned to win the North. That year, they also went from worst to first from 2017 to 2018. You know, that team was led by a number one defense and Khalil Mack, scraping
Right.
by on offense. I would say that this team is much more balanced. And I've got to give it to Chicago. You know, that first 4-game win streak that they went on, they beat a bunch of cupcakes. Then they went on the second 4-game win streak that led into that game at Philadelphia a few weeks ago. That was the first kind of Titan matchup that they had. They won that one, of course, lost to Green Bay. But in that first loss to Green Bay, they lost by a touchdown, and it felt like they were in that game all game. Of course, they beat the hell out of Cleveland, which you'd expect them to do. Buffalo, what were you doing last week? And then they come back and defeat Green Bay. And not only defeat Green Bay, and you know, again, Micah Parsons goes out in that Green Bay Denver game. So it's a different Green Bay team that they had faced just 2 weeks prior, but still they beat them and they put Jordan Love out of the game. I mean, this Chicago team is for real.
Yeah. And we knew how good the Chicago team was last year, but we knew that Matt Eberflus for the last 2 years wasn't the guy. Even before they brought in Caleb Williams, you already knew that that defense was really strong and really physical under Matt Eberflus for several years. Then you draft Justin Fields. Things apparently didn't really work out, right? And now you've got Caleb Williams to replace him, but you haven't done anything on the offensive side. So they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring in, oh my gosh, old Seattle guy. You must hate him. Who was the offensive coordinator last year?
Darren Bevel, and I did hate him. And DJ
No,
Moore,
not Darren Bevel, or maybe this was 2 years ago.
or not Darren Bevel. I know Scott Waldron is who you're talking about,
Shane
right?
Waldron,
Shane
player.
Waldron. And DJ Moore even came out and said, I run 3 routes on my route tree. I run 3 routes with this guy.
Anyways,
and then they finally got rid of him, but he's struggled everywhere he's been.
But yeah, that was midway through last year, right? They finally moved on from him. You thought, oh, nothing was great in Seattle. I don't know why they brought him in. So there was the ineptitude of Matt Eberflus and his ability to get the offense going. So we knew that the defensive roster was great, and we knew that there was plenty of weapons on offense. All you needed was a coach to kind of unlock it. Now the defense has been shaky in spots, and I think has gotten better throughout this year. And then the improvement, honestly, of just both sides of the ball, from offense to defense, Caleb Williams, it's been impressive to see. I struggle to say that they're for real because I look at the teams that they've played outside of Green Bay. You've got the Lions, like that's a quality win. I'm sorry, not a quality one. They lost to them earlier in the year. Let's see here.
They got stomped early in the year, right? In that week
Stomped
two
earlier in the
game,
year.
they got beat 52-21, and you had to ask yourself, is this going to be another really tough year for the Bears as Ben Johnson
Right.
gets things in place? And then are the Lions going to race to another postseason? And then, of course, you get to the end of the year, and we'll get to the Lions in a second, but they're on the outside looking in, and they're
Right.
several games away looking up at the Bears.
Yeah, and I kind of lost where I was going there, but the bottom line is the Bears have improved themselves. I'm just not sure where I think I'm not ready to believe it yet. I'm not ready to
Okay.
believe it yet, and I don't think it's inexperience. I think they have plenty of experience on both sides of the ball. I just there's something that's making me feel like they're just winning these one score games, and I don't think that they quite have the Kansas City swagger of no, like we casually win one score games because we've seen how quickly that can fall apart. So it's there's no stats to back this up. There's no what can you look at to kind of say this, that, and the other. It's really just I just don't know. But I tell you what, I love Ben Johnson's intensity. I love the physicality that he brings, and you can see that brain drain in Detroit live. How much
Huge.
his loss has impacted them
I
offensively
mean,
and
Dan
honestly
Campbell had
even
to take play
defensively.
calling back.
I mean, offensively and even defensively, right? If you got the ones on ones in practice and you've got a Ben Johnson led offense running at your defense, the physicality,
Great
like
point.
that makes your defense, right? The iron sharpens iron. And I think they're also missing that. So, um, I mean, this division is honestly theirs to win right now. So we'll see.
Do you see a world where Green Bay, with potentially no Jordan Love, and even if Jordan Love comes back from this concussion, no Micah Parsons, do you see a world where Green Bay wins out? And Chicago would have to lose. Obviously, Chicago finishes with two really tough games. Their whole end of season schedule was really tough, but they've got to go to
Yeah.
San Francisco this week. They're a 3-point underdog. I took San Francisco -5.5 against the Colts, and the only thing that I wish is that I had put a lot more on it because I had a really strong sense that this San Francisco team has been overlooked, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But what I kind of hear you saying is that hey, the Bears may not make it through the next two games unscathed, much less be a real Super Bowl contender. And I don't disagree with that. I think if you look at New England and you say, hey, there's a lot to like, but they're still too green, you got to look at Chicago and say the same thing, especially if Roma Dunze can't get back to a place where he's healthy week to week. He's a very important part of that offense, and credit to them for beating Green Bay without him. But I don't think I think if Rome doesn't play, they're a completely different offense.
Yeah, they're a completely different offense. It makes things tougher for DJ Moore, which he's had a very interesting season on that offensive side of the football. But what I love is the way that Monongai and Swift have both been used in the backfield. There's no tell. It's essentially, and it's a very light version of what you had with Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery. But there's a lot of talent in that backfield, and so when you take that pressure off the quarterback and you can hand the ball off, you can run screen passes, but you still have that threat down across the field. I think Colson Loveland is a great tight end, and he's going to continue to develop. There's a lot of promising things there again for the Chicago Bears. Kind of flipping back to Green Bay here. They've got, I believe, the Ravens
Home to the
and
Ravens,
home with the Ravens, and then they have to go somewhere, I believe.
at
Let me see here.
Minnesota. And they
At
announced today
Minnesota.
that J.J. McCarthy is not going to play this week. Obviously, short week. They're playing on Christmas Day. I had
Yeah.
already bet the Lions -6 because I suspected there would be no J.J. McCarthy. Now it's already moved to -7.5, and some books -8, which makes sense because the Vikings are going to roll out Max Brosmer in a game that Green Bay or that Detroit has to win this week. I think Detroit's going to eat Max Brosmer alive. Now, the
Have
question
to.
for me is, does J.J. McCarthy make it back? They didn't put him on IR, and they haven't said he's not going to play in Week 18. And I think, for both Detroit this week and Green Bay next week, if they get J.J. McCarthy, it's a game. If they get Max Brosmer, it's not. Do you agree?
I mean, I agree, but why trot him out there? There's nothing to
And
trot
I
him
agree
out
with
there
that.
for.
What are you
So I
doing?
think,
Right? The only
yeah,
argument is dude needs reps.
yeah, you do need reps, but I think they're just kind of keeping him alive for the gamesmanship side of things. I don't think there's going to be intent for him to actually play for the remainder of this year. He's better off packing it up, kind of keeping the confidence that he's had. And I think kind of just like really the last two games, sort of, I don't know if finding it's the right word, but at least looking better than he did earlier in the season. So I mean, and again, Minnesota's kind of a wash this year, but yeah, for the Packers, you got to go to Baltimore, a team
No,
that's
you get them
fighting
at
for their
home.
life
That is one benefit is they're getting
at
Baltimore at
home.
home this week. Yeah, they get them in
They're getting
Lambeau.
Baltimore at home, and you're getting a weak Baltimore team, right?
Yeah,
Like,
are you going to get
Is
Lamar with
Lamar
his back
Jackson
injury?
right? Is Derrick Henry going to give you a fumble at the worst possible time that he's been doing the last couple of years? Uh, you just don't know. But again, if you don't have Jordan Love, Christian Watson's injured once again. It just feels like Green Bay is in that similar situation that they've been the last couple of years, where they're not totally healthy and they're not totally healthy at key positions. The injuries to Jair Alexander last year, you had Jordan Love nicked up at different parts of the year. Josh
The
Jacobs'
wide
knee, he's
receiving
never
core.
100%. The wide receiving core, sometimes they're amazing. Dontavian Wicks could be a number one wide receiver on any other team, and then other games the ball doesn't even come his way. And you said this a couple weeks ago. I think we were talking during Thanksgiving. Matt LaFleur finds ways to lose games that he should absolutely win as a head football coach. And I'm kind of starting to see what you're talking about. I'm not sure if he's been able to establish and paint an identity this year more than anything. Last year, I loved it. It was Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs. Because of his knee injury this year, haven't really been able to do that. That tends to happen the year following an increased year of volume the previous year. So um,
They
it's
said that he
definitely
had his
tougher for him.
first receiving touchdown of the year, I want to say last week or two
Yeah,
weeks ago. And I was shocked because Josh Jacobs, to your point, is a great running back. But one of the things that makes him so great is he's been versatile. He's been a very solid pass catcher out of the backfield. He's been able
yeah.
to get in space. He's a better version of Kenneth Walker III when they're both healthy, but they just haven't used him that way this year.
Which is strange. That used to be kind of inside the 20-yard line. You could expect some sort of screen pass against the right look. Get that ball in Josh Jacobs' hands, he's going to make enough guys miss and break a tackle and score a touchdown. That just hasn't been the case this year. I'm
So,
not sure what the reason is for that, and you got to ask Matt LaFleur.
so what's your confidence level that Green Bay can split these last couple of games? Because if they split, then they're in and they lock up that
Well,
seventh seed. And then we can talk about how far can they actually go. But Detroit is depending on them losing both of these games. Do you see that as a realistic possibility?
for Green Bay, I think they can split. I think they can split both games because I think that they're going to be able to run the football against both teams. Minnesota, they're more known for confusing on the back end with Brian Flores. They're not necessarily run stoppers by any means. And Baltimore's defense just hasn't been fantastic this year. I think they've gotten better as the year's gone on. Kyle Hamilton's healthy, and he's just an absolute stud. But I don't think that's
Yeah.
enough. That's not enough to scare me on defense or to stop me from trying to run the football, which is what they're going to have to do. Emmanuel Wilson's going to have to get a lot of totes. Josh Jacobs is going to have to get a lot of totes, and they're going to have to find creative ways to get the ball to Dontavian Wicks and to Matthew Golden. I'm not sure how they're using him or what he hasn't developed into for Matt LaFleur not to be looking his way. They're going to have other dudes step up, especially if it's Malik Willis behind center. I still think it's very possible, even with Malik, to split those two games, and that's what they should be looking to do. All of my attention would be on beating Baltimore. If we can beat Baltimore, we can kind of take a deep breath, and then we'll worry about Minnesota when we get there.
Exactly. I completely agree. So that leaves, if we assume a split, that leaves Detroit on the outside looking in.
Yep.
Obviously the Lions have had a hard season as we talked about. It didn't start that way. The Lions started out hot. They were looking really good. And then the wheels have sort of fallen off. The Lions are now 8-7. They've had some tough losses, especially in recent weeks. They've lost to Pittsburgh last week, 29-24. They lost to the Rams 41-34 in a game that they led 24-14 and then saw the Rams rattle off 20 straight points. They lost to Green Bay in week 13. They lost to the Eagles. A lot of tough losses for Detroit. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's also been a very injury-riddled team. Outside of San
Yeah.
Francisco, no team has lost more games to injury than the Lions this year. And it's not just injury attrition. They lost both Ben Johnson and they lost Aaron Glenn. They replaced Ben Johnson with Morton. I can't remember his first name. And then Dan Campbell had to take over the play calling. And the offense was better once he did that. But
Yeah.
this just hasn't felt like the same Lions team all year.
Their defense is, I think, the tough part this year. And you'd think that their defense has been slightly more healthy, not the back end. At least that front seven of the defense has been healthier than they have been, especially compared to last year. but their defense is just giving up so many points is a problem. And I don't know if it's the offense's inability to kind of control the clock like they did previous years. It used to be they go up 10 points or they go up 2 full scores. You can't win because they're just going to run you to death with Gibbs and Montgomery. And it just doesn't seem like that's the attitude this year. I mean, Goff has thrown for over 300 yards. I can't remember how many times this year. They're putting up a ton of points, but again, they are giving up a lot of scores and continuing to put more and more pressure on that offense. So if you're not having this perfect performance with both that offense and defense complementary, they haven't been able to win football games. Again, losing to LA, like there's no reason for that to happen. Dallas scoring 30 points on you, and I know Dallas is a great offense, but you can't be letting them score 30 points. Green Bay on Thanksgiving, like it felt like the Lions were more in control of that game, at least in my opinion, than Green Bay was. But still, somehow you don't come away with a win. You barely beat the Giants in overtime. Like you can just go and look at the inconsistency of no matter who they're playing, you're getting an inconsistent. It's like playing to the talent level that you're going against. They can play up here with the best, or they can get down in the mud with some of the worst teams in the NFL and not perform well. So that Jekyll and Hyde-ness, that lack of standard that I think Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn brought is certainly missed. And then pile on the injuries. It's a recipe for failure, a tough year. So outside looking, I don't see a way. I don't see a way in for them. You got to go to Minnesota, and then you got to go to Chicago to fight for your life. And I don't think Ben Johnson's going to let Detroit come into Chicago and win that game.
I don't either.
Even if he has to knock somebody out by the knees. I can't remember who the figure skater I'm trying to think of is. Even if he's got to do that.
You're thinking of Nancy Kerrigan. Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan. Tanya Harding, one of Oregon's own. She's a Portland native.
Ben Johnson will do it. I've got no doubt. I've seen the fire in that guy's eyes.
All right, Nate. So one last question for you on the Detroit Lions, and I want to talk about the injuries just a little bit more in the secondary. You played college ball at wide receiver. I never got snaps after 7th grade, so we're in very different positions how we think about this. But, the Lions have seen both of their starting safeties, both of them former Pro Bowlers in Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, land on injured reserve, didn't come back this year. They had huge stretches this year where they were without one or both of their starting cornerbacks, and Terrion Arnold and DJ Reed. As an offensive skill set player, what do you think hurt them more? The loss of their safeties at the back of the defense, or the loss of those corners being able to come up and press properly, being able to tackle in the run game, etc.?
I think it's the pressure that it takes off of your Aiden Hutchinsons in your front end to get to the quarterback. Because if you're not stopping them on the back end, I just think it's over the top passing and everything over the middle. I think your inability to hold for at least 2.5 seconds, right, create that coverage sack, and now your defensive line has to get there quicker. And when the defensive line can't get there, then the pressure builds. Now I'm going to cheat my lane, and I'm going to get out of space, right? And now I've given a lane for the quarterback to step up or to step through, and I'm giving up these big plays on 3rd down. So that's the biggest thing, is the complementary side of having a great front seven and having that back end play very well. And when you've got guys like Kirby Joseph, Terrion Arnold kind of starting to turn into a polished version of himself that we knew was the potential when he was coming out of college. When you don't have those guys, it's really, really difficult to play complementary football. The rush might get there, but then if you don't have the coverage on the back end, then it's not going to perform very well. And if you're not covering all game, now you got to send extra pressure. That quarterback knows how to replace the blitzer, and now you just spend the entire game chasing the offense instead of setting the tone and making the offense take what you're giving them. The offense is just taking what they want against Detroit's defense instead of them being able to mandate what we are going to allow you to take. And that's the biggest problem of not having those guys healthy. And then flip that to the offensive side. Their O-line has just been tattered this year as well in different spots at different times of the year. And so when you can't have a consistent run game, Gibbs has had great games, but I think that tandem of Gibbs and Montgomery became very one-sided this year, trending towards Gibbs because he has a little bit more of that explosive ability.
That's a great point.
Bringing that back around from the offensive side, it's just, okay, we can run what we want here because they're chasing something and they just can't find it. Yeah. And that's what makes it really fun to play on the offensive side when you're kind of having your way, and then really, really tough on that defensive side where you're just like, it seems like no matter what pressure we run, no matter what base we operate out of, like we cannot stop these guys.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about having to get some stops in
Oh,
week
and I'm just real
17.
quick. I'm sorry. Just Brian Branch, I think is the best, arguably the best safety in football. Not having him, I think, is bigger than any one of the corners. Because not only is he a tone setter, but he's a coverage guy who can take the matchups with the tight ends, and he's physical in
Yeah.
the box. If they have him specifically back, I think that defense looks entirely different. Obviously, you want your best corners out there, but Brian Branch is to me that defensive piece on that back end that matters more than anybody.
You know what's funny is I've liked Brian Branch for a number of years, and this year Nick Emenwari for the Seahawks has sort of been a Brian Branch light in the way that he's been able to come down and serve as an extra linebacker, been able to have those tight end and slot receiver matchups, and then also play a little bit of center field. So yeah, I mean, seeing it week in week out, you are reminded how impactful that is. And then when he went out towards the end of that Rams game, that was one of the things that I really wondered: is no Reek Woolen, no Kobe Bryant, and no Nick Emenwari. How is Seattle going to stop this Rams passing attack? And they didn't. They won it on a 2-point conversion, and that's actually a great segue finally into our last topic, which is, boy, what were your emotions watching that Seahawks game on Thursday night?
That was crazy. So this year, I think I've watched less Thursday night football than any other year. I think the matchups haven't been great, and life gets going, and you just don't have time to sit down and watch it. But man,
Amen.
what an epic game of football, and what a strange game of football where it seemed like nobody wanted to take the reins and keep the reins. Nobody wanted to step away
Right?
and run away with control of that game. Nobody seemed to have a plan. Everyone just seemed like they were flying by the seat of their pants to try and win that game. It was epic. I do want to point out one thing. You did say I was a Seahawks fan earlier. I don't necessarily claim the Seahawks.
Oh, okay.
I am from the Washington, the
I made
state
an
of
assumption
Washington.
there.
So
We
you
need all
made a
the Seahawks
grand,
fans we
a
can get.
grand
Where do your
assumption.
allegiances lie?
NFL, I don't have an allegiance. Believe I'm a big players guy with the NFL, and then University of Oregon. Those are my squads. But yeah, I generally associate the Seahawks at times, but I don't want to be misconstrued for a super
Okay,
fan. Because
that's fair.
you start dropping some names. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I did notice that,
but
and I was like, oh, I might be going a little too deep here. But now that makes sense. That makes total
but
sense.
but
So,
it was an epic game against the Rams. The I don't it, the 2-point conversion was the strangest thing to me I'd ever seen.
it wasn't. It
Any
wasn't though, right? Like, I mean,
no,
we've seen balls deflected on backward passes before, and they're a fumble.
we're, yeah, but usually on a 2-point play or any play in general, okay, like incomplete pass, we're moving on next play. Not a whole ton of review. That felt like the longest
It did.
review process, like out of nowhere. Nobody on this planet was thinking, wait, that might have gone backwards. We need to. Everyone just thought, oh, screen pass, incomplete, great defensive play. Where's the kickoff? And then all of a sudden, you're like, what are they still reviewing? What's going
Yeah.
on right now? And then you see you see was it Barner picking up the ball? I can't remember who was
It
picking it up
was
in the end zone.
Zach Charbonnet, and I
Charbonnet.
wrote about this. Like, yes, there was a lot of talk among the commentators of what a heady play. No, he was just bored. He just picked up the ball out of curiosity.
Right.
He wasn't completing the play.
No, and what and
He just
I
got lucky. That's lucky.
I don't remember if there was a whistle that told everybody to stop once the ball hit the ground. That could have impacted things. I just thought that the way they treated that was so strange. So strange.
They didn't
But
blow
I
a whistle.
digress.
Like, I did go back and watch that again, and I will say credit to the referees. That would have been a very easy play to blow a whistle and then say, because we blew
Yeah.
the whistle, there could be no recovery, and that's it. And they didn't.
Yeah.
And ultimately, according to the rule book, which I will say, I was very surprised at the lack of understanding of the rule book on both sides. And then we saw it again in the Lions game. At the end of that Lions game, when they had the Amon-Ra St. Brown offensive pass interference, where they end up, the ball gets pitched back to Jared Goff. Jared Goff scores. They say this was a touchdown,
Right.
but offensive pass interference. And the Lions, even Dan Campbell came out and said, I thought we were going to get another play. Well, I've known for a long time that if the game or a half ends on a defensive penalty, we play an untimed down. If it's an offensive penalty, we don't. I was just a little surprised that was so surprising to the players and coaches on the field.
That was incredibly surprising because if that happens, offensive pass interference, right? That was the call. Yeah, if that happens, unless they decided to decline the penalty, I'm not even sure if they decline the penalty if you even get that play.
No, it's over.
But you only get that play if the defense wronged you. If the offense did the wronging, the play is gone. We're moving on to the next down. There is no next down because the play clock was done. It would have been an incredibly cool play for that finish. But yeah, very surprising that they were like, yeah, we thought we were going to get another play. I don't know in what world they thought they were going to have another play. But yeah, back to this Rams-Seahawks game. The Rams kind of played a perfect game. Their defense kind of let them down in some bigger moments, but the Rams played a perfect game. And so for the Seahawks, I think, to have the 2 turnovers from Darnold, one I think especially bad compared to the other.
Which one? The one to Turner where he dropped off the line into the throwing lane and picks them off at the goal line when they're down 30-14?
Yeah. In the goal, because anytime you're turning over the football in the red zone, it's bad. And when you're doing it and it looks like you had no idea that the defender was going to be there, that's especially bad. What was the second interception that was a little bit later in the game? I can't even remember. Bottom line is you gave up 2 interceptions and you still had the ability to come back and win that football game while your defense, that's supposed to be the best in the league, struggled a little bit against an offense that did not have Devontae Adams. So you're keying on Puka, you're keying on Kyren Williams. Parkinson somehow had a great game, the Rams tight end, like great for him. But for your team to be able to pull out a win like that, I thought was pretty impressive.
Can I say, though, and I hate saying this as a Seahawks fan, I did not come away from that game feeling like they were the better team. I did not come away from that game feeling like if these 2 teams meet in the playoffs, even if it's in Seattle, that I'm highly confident the Seahawks are going to beat them again. The Seahawks caught a lot of breaks, and then I look at after the Seahawks tied the game 30-30, there were 5 more possessions in the game down the stretch in the fourth quarter, and the Rams got tight. I didn't understand, every time they threw the ball to Puka, he couldn't be covered. He had 12 catches for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns, and it felt like a game where they should have thrown it to him even more. I mean, no Devontae Adams. There was, there were a few guys who stepped up. I can't even remember their names, Mumfield, something like that. But the Rams did feel like the better team, and the Seahawks caught a couple breaks and got a little lucky. I'm not saying that, I don't believe the Seahawks are still a Super Bowl caliber team, but I certainly didn't come away from that feeling great. And it gives me some worry, not about this week in Carolina. I think the Seahawks, even with the home Panthers being 5-2 in Carolina, Bryce Young, arrow up. We talked about Ted McMillan. He's playing really good football. The running game in Carolina it's not Monongai and Swift, but the Hubbard-Dowdle duo is effective, and the defense has done just enough. I still think Seattle's going to get through Carolina, but assuming the Niners beat Chicago this weekend, and I think based on what we've talked about, if you were to go one way or the other, it sounds like you'd go Niners -3 more than you'd go Bears +3. But that sets up the game of the year in San Francisco for all the marbles. And with the way San Francisco is playing, that scares the hell out of me as a Seahawks fan.
This sounds really strange to say, but I feel like San Francisco is enduring a dead cat bounce. Does that make sense? I feel like their season was over earlier. They're deciding to, fight the good fight, and they've looked great through this stretch. Kind of very under the radar, like we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, especially offensively.
I think that they've thrown their biggest punches. And I truly think that they have. And if Christian McCaffrey doesn't have a great game, this team's not very good. And I know that Brock Purdy had the 5 passing touchdowns, and he looked phenomenal. But that was against an Indianapolis team that is just reeling. Without Daniel Jones, The running game started to struggle a little bit more towards the end of the season with Jonathan Taylor. So the team that Indianapolis was previously in the year was certainly not the team that San Francisco was able to absolutely manhandle. And so when I did say dead cat bounce, I can't unsee their season being over with the loss of Fred Warner, with the loss of Nick Bosa, and I believe someone else on their back end. And so bringing that back around to Chicago, and I know I just talked about not necessarily trusting Chicago because things are still a little bit weird. I do have a little bit more faith in them as a unit than I do this San Francisco team to me that has been outperforming their ability. And I think that's what the ultimate case has been. The San Francisco has simply been outperforming. Bring that back to the Seahawks and the Rams. 3 turnovers again, the 2 interceptions by Darnold and the fumble. You're giving extra possessions to the Rams. One of them, though, I think not the interception, whatever the turnover was before the end of the first half, kind of inconsequential.
The fumble, right?
Yeah, didn't necessarily matter as much, but you could have potentially put at minimum 3 points on the board there. So when you say walking away from that not feeling like the better team, again, I look at that Rams box score and I'm like, they didn't really make any mistakes. And then I look at the Seahawks and what they gave up, and I'm like, I still feel really good about the Seahawks. And then throw in all the injuries and the mishaps that you mentioned earlier that kind of went over my head a little bit. I still feel really, really good. So yeah, I mean, you're going to have a game for all the marbles here in week 18, or a couple weeks here in 18. But I think that I think the Bears have a better chance than maybe I was alluding to earlier. I just went a lot of places there. Did you track that?
100%. And I would love to see the Bears win this game. I think, if they're going to, part of it will be George Kittle not playing. I don't know if you noticed, but he suffered an ankle injury last night on Monday Night Football. And, that offense is
fantastic game.
A fantastic game. Several big catches, in traffic over the middle, and he really kept the ball moving. He's important to that team. He's really important. They're not going to get Brandon Ayuk back. All year it was, when's he coming back? Well, he is coming back, but when's he coming back? And he's not coming back. So, but I think the big wild card for the Niners for me is, does Fred Warner come back? Because he is apparently a couple weeks away from potentially making a return from that nasty ankle injury. And I want to ask you, if he does, what percentage of Fred Warner levels up the Niners defense? Is 80% of Fred Warner good enough? Does he have to get to 90% or 95%? Ankle injuries are tough, especially for a guy that is asked as much of as is asked of Fred Warner.
Oh, man. I'm going to say this honestly. I don't know enough about the 49ers linebacking core to tell you how much of a difference Fred Warner is going to make at a certain percentage of health. I know that Fred Warner at his peak, any team would like him out on the field, but I'm not sure the difference he makes even at 80% for their defense right now. Because obviously they're playing at a much higher level than they were to start the year, and then obviously Fred Warner goes down, and they kind of, again, have come together under this common cause of everybody's counted us out, which has been the first time in a couple of years. Usually they've been the team to chase, and so they've had kind of something to rally around. I'm not really sure if he makes a massive difference. But maybe kind of on that George Kittle side, maybe it's emotionally. Maybe emotionally he provides that additional spark of like, hey, thanks for holding it down while I'm gone. Let's go get this, let's go get after it. That's what I could see, but I'm not sure.
You can't be a decoy at that position, though, right? Like that is the thing. They ask him to rush the passer, to stop the run. They ask him to go out in coverage. You can't be a decoy with a bum ankle.
At 75%, Fred Warner, I don't think does any good for the Niners. And 80%, I'm not sure does anything for the Niners. 90%, now maybe we're in a little bit of a conversation, but like you said, that physicality and that change of direction too, and the way he plays, if that ankle isn't right and he just gets a little bit stuck a few times, teams are going to abuse that. Teams are going to find a way to absolutely take advantage of that matchup just because he's not quite in game shape yet. So it might be a little bit more of a detriment.
Yeah, could be interesting. Looking forward to that game. Before I let you go, do you mind talking a little college football?
Let's talk some college football.
All right, so we started talking about this before we began the recording today, and we were talking a little bit about the Ducks. We both share a deep passion and heritage with the Ducks in our own personal lives. I am more worried than I think you are about the performance that we saw against James Madison, especially in that second half. Why don't you tell everybody what you told me on your take on that second half and how that has you thinking going into this massive matchup in the Orange Bowl with Texas Tech on January 1st?
Yeah, what we were getting at earlier was there were some fears about how the Ducks ultimately performed. An amazing offensive performance, but didn't close very strong. And I think a couple things concerned me. I think the one thing that concerned me the most was Dante Moore's interceptions were uncalled for. In a game like that against James Madison, you're dominating. You got to keep a clean sheet, right? You don't want to show up and be turning the ball over against kind of, I don't want to say like a juvenile defense because that's not the right way to say it, but a team that you just shouldn't be turning the ball over because
Minor
it's
league.
not. Yeah, minor league might be a better way to say it, and it's not because they made an amazing play. It's because a complete misstep in an error throwing the football. So that's concerning to me, and I feel like Dante Moore has done that a couple times, and he's done it in the red zone a couple of times this season, and that's been concerning. Um, Outside of that, I'm not worried about James Madison putting up points in the second half. Tends to be what happens. You're beating a team that bad. All you want to do is get out of there healthy, and you don't want to put anything else on tape. We're not showing adjustments to Texas Tech. We're not showing how we plan to line up against them. Because if we're being honest here, Oregon's probably looking past James Madison. Dan Lanning will get up there
100%.
and tell you. Dan Lanning will get there up there and tell you how seriously they took James Madison. But we know that they're spending an inordinate amount of time looking for it at Texas Tech and getting prepared. So again, they're not going to put anything new on film, no new adjustments on film, no new looks on film. They said, hey, we're going to go get this win. We're in control of this game, and we're going to get out. Would I have loved to have seen a Nick Saban Kirby Smart approach of just going to keep burying you until you can't anymore? Yeah, I would, but I don't hate the way it ended because you have a team that is quality in James Madison, right? They're not a horrible football program, but they have pride too. They have some playmakers too, and they don't want to be embarrassed in that way on the national stage. And so you kind of combine all those factors together. I have a little bit less worry going to Texas Tech, I think, than you do.
So knowing that it was a tune-up game, let me ask you about the receiving core because I think, not just have we talked about it, but everybody in the country has talked about when Oregon is fully healthy at receiver, they're one of the most talented receiving cores in the country, but they haven't been fully healthy all year. They lost what would have been the number one receiver, Evan Stewart, all the way back in June to a torn patellar tendon. DeCorian
Mm-hmm.
Moore has been in and out of the lineup. Gary Bryant Jr. suffered a leg injury. He's been out. None of those guys played. They all practiced last week, but none of them played. And I was hoping to see at least one of the three of them and see them get some snaps because, damn, man, if all three of those guys can get back on the field, and as you pointed out before the pod today, you pair that with the reps that Malik Benson and Jeremiah McClellan have gotten at wide receiver, that Jamari Johnson has gotten at tight end. That's a tough offense for anybody to stop. I don't even care if you're Ohio State.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you have to look forward to is potentially getting those weapons back. And we talked about it. So Gary Bryant Jr. not trending, or he's trending more likely than DeCorian Moore to get out there, or less likely?
Less likely. DeCorian
Less
Moore,
likely.
most likely. Evan Stewart, second. Gary Bryant Jr. is the
Okay.
furthest away of the
Okay.
three.
But yeah, either way, you look at how many reps some of your number two, number three guys have been able to get this season, and you look at the quality of offense that you've been able to put up throughout this year, despite Will Stein, football terrorist, as your offensive coordinator. I think that there's some really positive things, and then the defense this year. It's weird how sometimes you can watch a Duck game this year and feel like the defense isn't performing, and then you look at the box score and you look at the end
And it's
score of the
great.
game, you're like, oh my goodness, like we actually dominated them. I was at the game against Minnesota, and they kind of kept getting these bigger chunk plays. I'm like, oh my goodness, like our defense does not look good. Blah blah. I go back and watch like the speed replay on TV, and I'm like, we kind of just absolutely destroyed them. So
Yeah.
the defense is playing excellent this year. This is the first time I've seen a Dan Lanning defense get better from start to finish for a year. I feel like in years past, we've seen teams continue to make the same mistakes on defense that they made to start the year at the end of the year, right? And that's something you got to coach out of the guys. If we're in the wrong spot, wrong assignment, wrong alignment, not playing with effort, and we're seeing that in game 1 and 2, we can't be seeing that in week 8 and 9, 10 and 11, etc. And this was the first year I felt like we have genuinely seen that from the defense. I think Indiana was a great wake up call in terms of a bar fight. We've won another tough one against at Penn State earlier this year gives you some scars. Being able to handle some offensive firepower that USC has, like we've seen a lot of different teams and a lot of different types this year, and that gives me confidence defensively to continue moving forward. And then offense, yeah, like just if we get all of our guys back, if we get most of our guys back, that's incredibly terrifying. And then also Texas Tech's best win is BYU in the last week of the season, or you could argue maybe Houston earlier in the season. Like, there's not a lot of quality wins. Now, have they looked good? Have they looked flashy? You've seen, the Mahomes logo on their field. Like, they've done a great job with the NIL marketing. I just don't think that they quite have the horses yet to be able to compete with the University of Oregon.
I tend to agree. And I think going back to that Oregon defense, not only has the coaching been great this year, but some really smart transfers. I think especially Bear Alexander on the defensive line, replacing Derek Harmon, who went to the Steelers and has been critical to their run
Very
defense
impressive.
here. And then Dylan Thieneman, who was a second team All Big Ten safety at Purdue. He jumped ship. Good for him because Purdue was on fire. And obviously he's been really huge. And I think, going into this Texas Tech game, they're going to have to play great because the one guy on Texas Tech's team that I worry about a little bit is Jake Rodriguez. As a linebacker, he forces a lot of fumbles. He picks the ball off. He's really great in the run game. But overall, I feel good. I think it's a little weird that Oregon's only a 1.5 point favorite in this one. Vegas, this is, what used to be the pick'em zone. Back when I was a kid in the newspaper, it would just say pick'em. But now Vegas can't do that. So you see these spreads will go 1.5 point one way, and then they'll swing back and forth sometimes throughout a week. Oregon, I think, if I'm going to play this game, I'm definitely going to play Oregon. I mean, all they've got to do is win. You and I talked about this. They're playing in the Orange Bowl. I think that's terrible for Texas Tech. Last year we had that same experience. We didn't get a home game in Autzen Stadium, had to go to the Rose Bowl. Texas Tech doesn't get a home game. I think as a top 4 seed, you earn the right to play at home. I think that's wrong, but it is the way that it is. And so we're both going to go to Miami. I think that means that with these two fan bases, just realistically, I don't think it's going to be a sellout in Miami. I think there are going to be a lot of corporate tickets that don't end up in butts and seats. And I think even with Texas Tech having a slightly bigger percentage of the fans that are in Miami, I think Oregon is going to be just fine on offense. I don't think it's going to impact the operation. And because of that, and because of the fact that, to your point, Lanning didn't show anything. They've got stuff up their sleeve. You know it. And I think it's going to be the Ducks this week, or not this weekend, but on January 1st, that move on to the rematch with Indiana in the semis.
And another thing that scares me, and I do agree with you, I still think the Ducks pull out this game, and why it might be a 1.5 point favorite is not only do they have to go to Miami, it's a noon kick. That's 9 a.m. Pacific time. And yes, they're
And
going to
11 a.m. for Texas Tech. Very different when you're coming from the Central Time Zone.
Yeah, I've played in a noon game at Autzen, and you are so tired. You have to be up so much earlier. Now, again, I move that to the East Coast. Right after Christmas, they're probably going to travel and be there to try and get
I was
assimilated.
going to ask
But
you that.
that's still going to be tough. You got to show up. There's the distraction of not just the bowl game, but it's New Year's. These are young kids, right? They want to go out. They still kind of want to have a New Year's. There's that distraction. And again, that game is at noon. You got to be up so early for that game. So wind that clock back to probably 6 a.m. You've got wake up calls and breakfast and stretching, and then you got team meetings, and then you got to drive, probably an hour and some change from Miami out to Coral Gables. And then you've got to start getting ready for the game. You got to have more interest. That whole game day process gets moved earlier into the day. And that is going to be, I think, I don't want to call it a barrier, but it's going to be tough. Like, what Oregon team quite literally wakes up to play on that noon kick? And like I said, Texas Tech, they have to deal with a little bit of a time change as well. But that noon kick is going to be very difficult. And I mentioned Will Stein as a football terrorist. Is he a solid offensive coordinator? Yeah, absolutely. But there's times where the Ducks can be in control of a football game or early in a football game. Let's just call a random trick play for
Right.
no reason that hasn't been set up. And it doesn't work. And you're like, why did we even run this? We just caused chaos. Now we're third and long. And we're giving this other team momentum thinking that we have to run a trick play to achieve anything. We can run the ball, we can run the ball 3 downs if we really, really wanted to. We're that great at the run game. And so, um, I'd like to see great decision making from the offensive coordinators, and we need to see a team that wakes up juiced and ready to play.
So I want to ask you one last question about that as somebody who's played in a game like this early in the day. Is it something that, it affects the team if it is going to affect them? Is it going to affect them for a series, a quarter, a half? Is that something that lingers for a whole game? How do players react to that? Like, do you
Yeah,
warm up?
it can be totally dependent on the player. And sometimes you'll see it most in the quarterback, like their eyes just kind of look like a little bit glossed over and they can't really read and process things. And again, like for some guys it's different. Some guys wake up and it doesn't really matter. So it's certainly player to player. But in terms of getting a team all back on that same page, sometimes it can take a half of football. Sometimes it can take a quarter of football. We saw against Ohio State, like they jumped on us aggressively last year, and there was no waking up from that. So it can take, it's player dependent, but then getting everybody on the same page is the bigger piece. Because certain
Yeah.
guys will wake up and have it. Some guys, they're too jittery the night before, add that in. Like there's just so many factors, and that's what makes football beautiful, right? You can have the best players at certain positions, but if not all 11 are doing their alignment, their assignment on time with high effort and energy, you can get beat on any play. And that play can be absolutely game changing. So, um, it's a big what if, and I think it's something that's a little bit overlooked. West Coast going to East Coast.
Yeah, makes sense.
Four,
All right.
yeah, 4 or 5 o'clock game. I'm loving it for the Ducks, but not.
I would feel a lot
Ooh,
better about that.
absolutely.
But, we're up against some other big games on Saturday, and that's the last thing that I want to ask you. We've got three other games that are essentially a touchdown or more of a spread. The Ducks are a 1.5-point favorite. I think we're both on the Ducks there. But we
Yep.
saw Alabama, Ole Miss, and Miami all win last week. We've got the 10 seed Miami playing Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. They're a 9.5-point underdog, almost 3-1 to win the game. We've got Alabama going to the Rose Bowl across the country to play Indiana, where I think those Indiana fans are going to show up in force. If you are going to travel for one of these games, LA is a great place to travel to. And, the Rose Bowl, who knows how much longer that's going to be in commission. It sounds like UCLA is trying to build a new stadium, yada, yada,
Right.
yada. And then in our last of the three games, we have Ole Miss, who looked very good against Tulane, but similar to James Madison, you're talking about a AAA baseball team in the World Series playoffs. Like, get fucking real. And I think, Georgia as a 6.5-point favorite, like Indiana, the Vegas obviously feels very strongly that they're the better teams. But of these three underdogs, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Miami, who do you think is most likely to spring the upset and make their way into the semifinals?
I think it's Alabama. I think Alabama has the best chance. And I love Indiana's physicality, and I love their simplicity on offense, but how hard it can still be to stop. And I love that the way that Surratt was talking about, we want to drag you into the deep end and we want to get in a bar fight. I've watched Kalen DeBoer pull too many rabbits out of a hat in games where he shouldn't have. That gives me confidence that he's going to be able to put something together. You're going back to the West Coast, somewhere he's familiar with. He's probably played in that Rose Bowl setting more times than who's the head coach?
Cignetti.
Cignetti, right? He's probably played in that environment more. I think there's going to be a comfort level that, from a head coaching standpoint, he's going to have showing up in the LA than Cignetti's going to have. And albeit Cignetti's personality doesn't seem to care what it is, I just think Kalen DeBoer is going to put together a game plan that is going to keep them in it just enough to win the football game. I don't think Alabama's showing up to blow them out. I think we saw them kind of get their teeth kicked in by Georgia, which is a little bit embarrassing, but I just don't think Indiana has that same knockout power that maybe a Georgia or Ohio State does, albeit they beat Ohio State. Yeah, so I just think if any team did it, it'd be them. I don't think Miami has a chance. I just think that they're frauds. I think Cristobal's a fraud. And then Ole Miss maybe has a second best chance just because offensively they might be able to hang with Georgia. But I think Georgia has really started to ascend towards the back end of the season. They had a lull last year. Stockton has started to grow into his shoes this year. Their defense is incredible per usual. So I just think Georgia's going to kind of handle Ole Miss.
I agree. I think the talent disparity is going to be too much. There's a reason why Lane Kiffin left and went to LSU, because every time a recruit in
I
the
didn't
SEC,
even factor that in. Yeah, that's it.
yeah, I mean, no
That's a
Lane
huge
Kiffin
fit right there.
And as the play caller, yes, Charlie Weiss Jr. is back, and 5 other coaches came back. But if you're going to need Lane Kiffin's play calling acumen, you're going to need it against a defense like Georgia. And they had it earlier in the year when they came up short. They probably felt like they could have and should have beaten Georgia in that game that they lost 43-35. But I tend to agree. I just think the Ole Miss defense is not good enough. And I think, it was telling that when Lane left, a lot of the offensive players were like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the defensive players were like, we're staying. And they promoted the defensive coach to head coach, which I think is going to turn out to be a mistake for Ole Miss because their defense is the worst part of their team. But I do agree that I think Georgia's just going to be too much. And Georgia's the one team that gets to play at home. They're playing in Atlanta. They're playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So, everybody else has got to travel. But that game is going to – I know Ole Miss is going to try and pack as many people into that stadium as they can. It's still going to be 80-20 Georgia, and it's going to feel like a Bulldogs home game. I tend to agree with you that if one of these teams is going to spring the upset, and like you, I have no faith in Mario Cristobal whatsoever – it's going to be Alabama, but I think it's going to be because of the loss of Stephen Daly, their superstar defensive tackle, total game changer. He was the only player on either team, on either side of the ball that played every single snap in the Big Ten championship game, led the nation in tackles for loss. He was a force, and on passing downs, he wasn't just a run stopper. He was collapsing the interior pocket and going against an Alabama passing offense that, they're a very one-dimensional team. I think, they have Jam Miller back, but Alabama hasn't run the ball well. Well, no Stephen Daly. They're going to run the ball better than they would have run it with him there. And on passing downs, Ty Simpson's going to have more time. And, look, Ryan Williams is at a terrible year, which is shocking. If you go to the end of last year, it wouldn't have mattered what year somebody was. The 2 freshmen, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State and Ryan Williams at Alabama, were widely considered the 2 best wide receivers in the country, and Ryan Williams has fallen off a cliff. But that's okay, because Alabama still has Jeremy Bernard. They still have Horton, what's his name? Isaiah Horton, and they have Brooks. I can't remember his first name. Lozier Brooks. And all 3 of those guys are NFL level talents that are going to stress test your defense. So I agree with you. I actually don't think any of them are going to spring the upset, but I think if one is, it's going to be Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
Well, we've got a week to wait on that. I hate that. I would love to see, I posted a week or so ago a proposed new model for the college football playoff that nobody's ever going to take seriously. But, essentially taking the 12-team tournament, making it 16, and then breaking those 16 bids into 11 that go through the conferences and then 5 that go through wild card games after all the conference games are played. And you wouldn't have a break. We would move the season up a week. You would play all the way through the second week of January like we do today, but we'd get a lot more football. I don't know who loses in this. When you think of the 4 stakeholder groups, the NCAA and all their partners, the conferences, the schools, and the players, everybody wins in a situation like this. It still boggles my mind that if you think about the chart of like human evolution from Neanderthal to modern day human, we're like one short of that. We're still like not quite fully evolved, and it's the only sport that way. So I would love to see that change, but in the meantime, we have a week to wait.
We've got a week to wait. What a week to wait, by the way. We get Christmas all the way up into New Year's, so it'll be nice to hang out on the couch, and then we've got some incredible football over the weekend.
Indeed. Nate, I can't thank you enough for making the time. This has been a great discussion, and I hope everybody has enjoyed it. We've got a great week of football ahead, and I hope everybody has an incredible holiday.
Merry Christmas, everybody, and happy holidays.
Hey, y'all, we are back at Barely Qualified Picks. I've got JC here, and we are going to get into our Week 17 picks. As you all know, it is a big slate this week. There are 4 what I would call potential games of the week, massive games with massive implications. There are some dud games as well. You expect that in Week 17. But, here we are. We are coming down the stretch, 2 games to play, and a lot of marbles to play for. JC, how are you feeling?
Feeling great. All my Christmas shopping is done. I am ready to go. We are 2 days away from the big day, and I got a really nice prime rib that I'm dry brining right now. So I am ready for what may be a disappointing slate of games on Thursday. But hey, the food's going to be rocking. I think the K-pop Demon Hunters are going to be one of the halftime shows, so my kids are going to be locked in. and we're in for a treat this week.
Like a semi-treat when it comes to Christmas Day football. It's funny, on Thanksgiving Day, we remarked to each other how it was potentially the best Thanksgiving Day slate that we remembered. And I think we have kind of the opposite with the Christmas Day slate this year. We start with Cowboys at Commanders, then we roll into Lions at Vikings, which is now going to be Lions at the Max Brosmer Vikings. JJ McCarthy has been ruled out, but not put on IR. So doors still open for him to come back, though I don't know why he would. And then we finish with the nightcap, which is the Broncos at the Chiefs. And not only did the Chiefs lose Patrick Mahomes 2 weeks ago, they lost Gardner Minshew last week to an ACL tear. So they're on quarterback number 3 as well. And things are just bad in Kansas City. So, when I look at these 3 games, Cowboys Commanders might be competitive. Lions Vikings probably won't, and neither will Broncos Chiefs. I'm glad that we have Christmas Day football. I just wish that we had one matchup that mattered.
100% agree. It's also tough where you look at the preseason standings for each of these games, and Netflix probably shelled out a lot, and they were probably very excited for what was slated. And then even if you look 5 weeks ago, the Chiefs were on the charge, still contesting the division. The Cowboys offense was firing on all cylinders while the defense was on the rise. Jaden Daniels was coming back, and now it's just like, oh, geez, how fast, the turntables, as Michael Scott might say.
Yeah, the tables turn. It do be like that, and that's the nature of the NFL. You're totally right. At the beginning of the season, Netflix had to feel great about getting 3 big-time divisional matchups with teams that either were in the playoffs last year or had playoff caliber rosters and didn't break that way. We'll get to that in a second. First, I want to call out that in my written blog on Substack, I've got this battle with Gerald every week, Gerald the Quarter. Last week, you and I did pretty well. I don't remember exactly where we broke, but we were pretty in line on our picks, and I went 10-6 last week. So one of my best weeks of the year. Felt really confident about the slate. Feel that way this week as well. Gerald only went 6-10. So Gerald had a 2-game lead on me coming into last week. I tabled the turns on him as well. And, I am now thrilled to be 2 games up, but we've got 2 weeks to go, and I definitely want to outperform a freaking coin. So we need to get at it, and I need to do well. Another 10-6 week would be amazing, and I think it could be in the cards. So we'll talk about the cards in a second. Don't feel good about them, but let's start with Cowboys -7 at the Commanders on Christmas Day. What are you thinking on this one?
I'm leaning towards the Commanders here. The Cowboys have damn near nothing to play for. I think they still have a puncher's shot at the playoffs. I'm looking at
they're out.
They're out. They are
out
firmly eliminated.
Eagles won.
Whereas the Commanders are kind of seeing what's working. They're seeing what's vibing. Marcus Mariota has been able to move the ball when he's not throwing it to the other team. And their unique running back duo in Rodriguez and Bill Krogsky Barrett have actually been kind of working. So I think they'll actually be able to put points on the board. And as we talk about so often, 7 points is a lot of points in an NFL game. So I'm kind of leaning towards the Commanders in a dud of a game that ends up like 14-10.
That's funny. What I wrote is this is a crap fest, and I won't be surprised if this crap fest breaks in favor of the Commanders. But when I look at the rosters, the best unit on the field is going to be the Dallas offense. And Dak Prescott came out this week and said, I am not going to sit down. I'm going full force for the rest of the year. I think as your quarterback goes, so does your team. And the Commanders have been bad. The Commanders have not just lost a lot. Most of the games that they've been playing, they've been getting blown out. You're right. 7 points is a lot. It's in Washington. It's a really early game. I want to take Washington. I want to back Marcus Mariota, but I just don't see it for the Commanders. I think this is the type of game that the Cowboys win, and win convincingly enough to further piss off their fans and say, where was this all year? So I'm going to take the Cowboys -7.
Their fans are going to be really looking forward to next year.
I mean, Cowboys fans are always Always looking forward to next year. I think this year especially because there was such a flash there from the Cowboys, and even the defense, once all of the pieces got in place, looked pretty good for a couple of games. You have to look at the season and say what could have been. But I also wonder, are they going to bring back George Pickens? Because George Pickens was amazing in stretches, and then he kind of disappeared in stretches, and that's sort of what he's done in his career. And, all of the reports out of Dallas are they love having him in the locker room. He's a great guy, but he does show up late to a lot of meetings. He shows up late to the bus. These are things that they are willing to tolerate, but tolerate at what price? Are they going to give him a huge contract? And look, it's a zero-sum game. You give George Pickens a huge contract, that's less money to invest elsewhere. Go ask Cincinnati how they're managing their salary cap with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins all on massive contracts. It ain't easy.
Hey, I hear there's potentially a number one receiver who might be available in the offseason coming out of Pittsburgh. Say what you will about George Pickens. At least he doesn't take shots at fans.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. And I will just correct the record to say there's a number one wide receiver body coming out of Pittsburgh, but never has he actually been a number one wide receiver. This was the joke, right? You and I were talking about this over the weekend when we were all together with the family. John Schneider should get GM of the year, not for the players that are playing on the Seahawks this year, but for who's not. For, the moves that he made to get off of Geno Smith and bring in Sam Darnold, the move that he made to get off of DK Metcalf and really focus the offense on Jackson Smith and Jigba. Even the Rashid Shaheed move is panning out, but it's those first two, addition by subtraction, that have unlocked a lot of what Seattle has been able to accomplish this year. And man, like, somebody else is going to take a chance on DK Metcalf, and they're going to be disappointed as well. 12 to 13 games out of the season. Then you're going to get 4 to 5 games where he's going to look like Megatron. The thing about Megatron is Megatron did it every week, draped in double coverage. DK Metcalf is a total enigma. He's totally unpredictable, and that is not worth the money that you have to pay to somebody of his wide receiver number one body type.
My gut says he's going to be a Raider or a Chief next year. I don't know why the Chief pops to mind, but that feels like a chance that they'll take to get a big body receiver to go along with their dual speed threats. And hey, maybe if Pat Mahomes is yelling at him, he'll actually listen and they'll win a lot. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but the Raiders is probably the type of organization that would actually take a shot on it.
I could see that. All right. So in our second game of the day, middle of the day, we have the Detroit Lions, who are now -7.5 at the Minnesota Vikings. This game opened at Lions -6 before there was definitive news coming out of Minneapolis with regard to JJ McCarthy's new hand injury, which he suffered last week. JJ McCarthy is not going to play this week. It's notable that they did not rule him out of week 18. They did not say he's done for the year and they're shutting him down. They did not put him on IR. I also have no idea why Minnesota would bring him back this year. I mean, you could argue it's reps, but the guy has been injured, and when he hasn't been injured, he hasn't been great. And Minnesota at this point is just ready for the year to be over. I think with Max Brosmer in there, this is a pretty easy one. The Lions are still technically alive. They got to win this week. And then they need Green Bay. Green Bay can win this week. Green Bay can't win this week. They need Green Bay to lose this week at home to Baltimore, which could happen. And they need to win and keep moving. And so I just think that this is a game, given the Lions are playing before the Packers. So the Lions have no idea what the Packers are going to do on Sunday. And Max Brosmer is just not good. And when you have a quarterback that bad, even with the Lions secondary and their defensive line being as decimated as it has been by injuries this year, the Lions should be able to get after Brosmer. It should give Jared Goff some short fields. And I've got to think the Lions are going to pile up points this week. I'm surprised, honestly, that the spread didn't move more than 1.5. What do you think?
I think it didn't move more than 1.5 because Vegas kind of knew, and there was a puncher's chance that McCarthy might have played, but the writing was on the wall. The only thing that gives me pause is we've seen a few different teams really bottle up Jahmyr Gibbs this year and David Montgomery this year. And when I look at, um, what the Vikings have been able to do against some really good offenses, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it could be one of those weird games where the defense does enough to keep it in it. But like we've seen Brosmer start a game, it was not good. He is that evidence of when you have that buddy that thinks he could play NFL quarterback.
Uncle
And
Rico.
Uncle Rico, sure, but at least Uncle Rico played in high school, and could throw a ball over the mountains. It's just not good. He's going to get lit up. He's going to probably throw a couple picks. They're probably going to rely heavily on the run, and I think you're right. I think the Vikings are going to be looking to just get out of this game, get off this season, and then they're going to have to look really hard in the mirror. The entire theory with JJ McCarthy was, he embodied the team spirit. He wasn't asked to throw much in college because they had such a power run game, and he was a development quarterback while he was going to Kevin O'Connell, the quarterback whisperer when you're looking at head coaches. But they let Sam Darnold walk. Sam Darnold, who's, a dark horse at this point because of the bad stretch he had, MVP candidate, but he is an MVP candidate. And there are a lot of QBs in this draft that, could potentially be available in that 5 to 10 spot if you're the Vikings looking at where you're potentially going to be drafting.
I mean, we've seen it before where a team will move off of a high draft pick quickly at quarterback for somebody else. I can't remember the last time we saw it, but I know
Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray
Yeah.
was the first one where they drafted
Rosen. Josh Rosen. Yeah.
Yep.
And, look, I think you're right about the Vikings. I think they are going to be looking very hard at the quarterback market coming out of this season and at least wanting to have a second option that's not Max Brosmer. And if they get somebody that outplays JJ McCarthy, I think they would be willing to accept that from a contract standpoint. Wouldn't be bad to have a guy like JJ McCarthy as your backup on his rookie contract. You could actually carry 2 rookie quarterback contracts and still have a lot of money for the rest of the team. I just think here it's going to be way too much. I think the Lions are going to pour it on. I expect this one to be a blowout.
I hope so. I've already sprinkled a little bit on the Lions -7.5, so I'm obviously there as well. But we've seen this happen before, where when it was a Niners backup before Brock Purdy came in, like back then, where he came in and it was just like, who is this kid? Where did he come from?
We're talking about Nick Mullins.
Yes, Nick Mullins when he came in his first start and he lit it up, but obviously he's actually panned out as a career backup.
Yeah, I mean the
Brosmer's
Kyle Shanahan, right?
Yeah, Brosmer's not going to get a second deal, I don't think.
Last thing that I'll say on this game, there's a lot of injuries on the Minnesota side. Not only does backup running back, who, functionally is 1B to Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, he's not supposed to play. TJ Hawkinson doesn't look like he's going to play. There were a few other injuries. And I think the last thing is, normally the Vikings have a pretty good home field advantage. You sent me a Reddit tracking the ticket prices on the secondary market for these Christmas Day games. And when you look at that Minnesota Vikings line, it is down, 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 down. There are a lot of people who are not going to go to this game. It's not going to have that typical Minnesota NFC North rivalry intensity. And I think that's going to make it all the easier on the Lions in getting in and out of the right play calls and ultimately, punishing a Minnesota defense that likes to be variable. They're going to try and create a lot of confusion in the secondary. But, this Lions team is going to be very straightforward. I think they're going to run the ball. I think we're going to see more David Montgomery than we've seen in a while. And ultimately, I think, like I said, I think they're going to pour it on. Seems like we agree on that. And that leads us into the nightcap on Christmas Day. I think this is going to be another blowout. We have the Broncos -13.5 at the Chiefs. I meant to look at who the Chiefs are starting this week. I don't even know who they're starting, but I can't imagine that the third string quarterback for the Chiefs is like anything better than Max Brosmer. We'll just call him.
So I just looked him up, and I'm fascinated to know if you know where he went to college. And I'm probably going to butcher his name.
All right.
Chris Oladokun?
Nope.
All right. I think that. Oh, he went to South Dakota State. So they're starting a quarterback from South Dakota State.
I mean, and look, South Dakota State is a program that won a lot. I can see why they would go grab a developmental quarterback like that and stash him on the roster and see if, that winning pedigree can translate. I'm sure he's got good measurables if you look at his height and weight, because they wouldn't take an undersized quarterback from South Dakota State, I wouldn't think.
Well, they didn't take him. Pittsburgh took him in the 7th round in 2022.
Okay, and so what is he height weight?
6'1", 213.
Yeah, so decent sized guy, not huge, but a decent sized guy. Look, he's going to get eaten alive. He's going to get absolutely eaten alive. When you look at weapons like Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, I don't even know if Rashee Rice is going to be playing. He got injured last week, didn't he? I thought something happened.
He's questionable.
Okay, so even if they play, even if Travis Kelce plays, they're not those offensive skill position players that are going to take over a game for a crappy quarterback. They're just not. And the Chiefs running backs are not going to do that either. He is going to get sacked. I'm going to call it 5 times in this game. I bet Nick Benito alone gets 2.
How many picks do you think Pat Surtain gets?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if this kid avoids Pat Surtain. And he's
a smart decision.
I think you're going to see Pat Surtain is just on his own island, and he doesn't get a lot of action this week. And, frankly, I think it's going to be hard for the Chiefs offensive line, which if you go back to that last game that they lost against the Chargers where Patrick Mahomes got injured, one of the big reasons why Patrick Mahomes got injured is because they're without their left tackle, Josh Simmons, for several weeks. They're without their right tackle, without their right guard. That situation hasn't really gotten better. And, the beauty of a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen or one of those top flight quarterbacks is how mobile they are in the pocket and their ability to make the most of a shoddy offensive line. That is not plays. That is not Max Brosmer. And I don't remember what you said the guy's name was, Chris something or other. And I'm just going to call him Max Brosmer 2 because that's essentially what he is. Max Brosmer 2 is fucked this week against the Broncos. And it's a lot of points. 13 started at 12.5. I got it at 12.5, quickly went up to 13.5. I don't even think it's a 2-touchdown game. I know it's at Arrowhead, but you don't think the Broncos are going to be delighted to go into Arrowhead and even against a depleted Chiefs team, kick the crap out of their division rival who has owned the AFC West for the last 10 years? I do.
If you are a Broncos fan, I know it's Christmas Day. It is
Christmas in KC, baby.
It is cheaper to get a round trip, day of flight, and a ticket to the game and an Uber to the game to go to this game than it is to go to a game in Denver this year.
For sure. You could be sitting close to the field. There's no doubt about it. You might get murdered by the fans at Arrowhead who are passionate enough to come out for this game and disappointed enough to kill somebody. So I would say wear neutral colors or just be very, very cordial. But I agree with you. It's wild how the ticket prices have plummeted. But again, it's Christmas Day. If you're a Kansas City fan, it's one thing to go see Patrick Mahomes. Even in a year where they're not making the playoffs, it's like at least I can take my kid to see his hero.
Mm-hmm.
How many kids' hero is Travis Kelce these days? Like, I got to say, if there's anything that hurt his stock, I promise you there are little boys who are like, I used to like Travis Kelce, but all the girls like Taylor Swift, and so now I can't like Travis Kelce, so I got to pick somebody else. Like there is a trade-off here.
In a big way. And it's going to be cold. It's Kansas City in late December. It is not a balmy fall day.
No. But you know who doesn't care about that? The Broncos don't care about that. They're ready to go play a cold game and tune up for the playoffs. All right, John, then we have a couple days off and we get into Saturday football. And there's no CFP this weekend, so it's all NFL on Saturday. We've got 2 pretty darn good games. I think these are Netflix games as well, right? No, they're not Netflix games because Netflix only has Christmas Day. So they definitely have to be looking at these games and going, darn it. Although they did get Bears-Packers on Black Friday, wasn't it? Well, they got a great game on No, it was Eagles-Packers on Black Friday, which was a great game.
Eagles-Bears. Eagles-Bears. Bears had that huge 125-yard rushing game from Monungai and Swift. It was incredible.
Did. Okay, so we start off the day with the Texans, 2.5-point underdogs at the Chargers. I actually kind of think about the Chargers. I hate to say this, it's a little disrespectful, but I think about them as Texans light. Their defense is really good. They stop the run well. They don't give up a lot of big plays. I love Derwin James, but they're not quite the Texans. You know, you look at the Texans and Derek Stingley Jr. might be the best cornerback in the entire league. What Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson have done rushing the quarterback opposite one another has been incredible. The Houston defense has been just a force all year long at every level. And then you look at that Houston offense, and if I was going to say edge one way or the other, Houston or Chargers, I might give it to the Chargers, but like CJ Stroud against Justin Herbert, kind of a wash. When you look at the...
I disagree. I think Herbert is worlds ahead right now. The problem is he's getting the shit kicked out of him, play in and play out. Will Anderson is going to be in his lap 40% of the plays he has. But I mean, that's just been the world that Herbert's lived in this year.
And I'm taking that into account. I'm saying
Okay.
from a matchup perspective, when you look at this, I don't think one quarterback has a decided advantage over the other, because I do agree with you. Justin Herbert is more accomplished. He's more seasoned. It's been a couple of years since we've seen really good CJ Stroud, but CJ Stroud has a lot more protection. And between the two of them, I actually like Woody Marks and the Texans running game more than I like Omari Hampton and Kamari Vidal and whatever it is the Chargers are putting together these days. You look at the receiving core, and I probably like the Chargers options more, if for no other reason than Keenan Allen, because that guy is a third down machine. But, you know, when I look at this all together, I could see this game go either way. It's in Los Angeles. I think the Chargers under Jim Harbaugh are going to be ready to play this game. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring game, 16-13, 17-14, something like that. So definitely the under. I think the under is at 36.5 or 37.5. I definitely think this game goes under. I'm probably leaning the Texans, especially because I'm still holding on a little bit of hope for my Texans AFC South bet. But which way are you going to go on this one?
I'm really torn here because I've been a big Texans believer since Davis Mills won that third game in a row and really showed some life. Now, with the Jags winning in Denver, that makes that road to an AFC South crown very, very difficult. They needed the Jags to drop a game. The Jags are going to play the, Phillip Rivers led Colts this week. I believe Phillip Rivers is starting, and they're going to finish against Tennessee. So the Jags are probably going to win out. So Houston's really playing for seeding at this point. Now, you look at that Raiders game, way closer than I think anybody expected. Ashton Gianti finally had his coming out party, but it also makes you wonder if that was a bit of a look-ahead game for them, and that tells you how focused they are on this Chargers game and how important this is, not just for them making the playoffs as they're trying to stave off, everybody else, but also they're playing for seeding, right? You would much rather
playing for the AFC West. They're not eliminated in the AFC West yet. Denver's lost 2 straight.
Sorry, I'm talking about Houston still.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the Chargers.
But you are correct, is the AFC West is still within reach, especially with, Denver. It would be hard for them to drop the ball down the stretch, but they absolutely could do it. And then on top of that, they're not going to let their foot off the gas. That's not the Jim Harbaugh way, and they want to be tuned up going into the playoffs. Woody Marks did not play last week, but he is slated to play this week. They're not going to be fully relying on Nick Chubb again. I really like the Texans. I think that defense is going to be just too much, and I think that Herbert, he's going to be lucky if he gets out of this game alive.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him. There's no doubt. And so, I'm glad we're both on Texans there. I really would like to see the Texans win out. I still think, you're right, the Jags have the inside track. They finish at Indianapolis, like you said, Old Man Rivers, and then they've got the Tennessee Titans at home. Cam Ward has improved a lot. I think there's a 0% chance they go 0-2. I think there's an 80% chance they go 2-0. But I think there's a 20% chance they lose one of those 2 games. And if they're going to lose one, I think it's most likely going to be this weekend at Indianapolis. I think every game that Rivers plays is going to be a little bit harder for him physically. But I think we saw, he's a big dude. He's still got enough in the tank to get through this week. And he scored plenty of points. It was that Indianapolis defense that couldn't limit the 49ers. And that is not to say that they're going to be able to limit the Jaguars. But you know how these games go, a couple of bounces in different directions. Indianapolis is not eliminated from the playoffs. This is a kitchen sink game for them. So I'm not convinced that the Jags are going to get the job done, but you're absolutely right. They have the inside track, and they should, for all intent and purpose, they should get it done.
Yeah, and I mean, you looked at Rivers carving up that Niners defense, but for that pick six at that very end of the game, Rivers was driving down the field with 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left, down 2 scores, and if he scores and we see an onside kick or even finally a stop from the Colts, maybe it's a tie game at the end of that game.
Could have been. All right, so Saturday night, we have the Ravens plus 2.5 at the Packers. As you know, this is a pivotal game for Green Bay, who needs to at least split their final 2 games to keep hold of the 7 seed in the NFC. And I'm sure that they're keen to finish the job this weekend and give themselves an opportunity to rest some key players in Week 18. They're going to need to get Jordan Love back. He is moving his way through the concussion protocol, but if he doesn't come back, then they turn to Malik Willis, who probably will play, but strained his shoulder on Sunday as well. So the quarterback situation is not great for Green Bay. And of course, they don't have Micah Parsons for the rest of the year. They lost Tucker Kraft weeks ago. This is not going to be an easy game. That said, we're looking at a shaky quarterback situation for the Ravens as well, because Lamar injures his back last week. As you and I talked about earlier, a back injury is a big deal for a quarterback if it's real, because not only is it going to impact your mobility, not only are you going to feel every hit a lot more, but your back and your shoulders are integral to your throwing motion. And is he going to be able to maintain decent accuracy on downfield throws? And if he doesn't, if he's limited to a range of short underneath routes, that Packers defense, even sans Micah Parsons, should be able to bottle up Lamar Jackson. And if Lamar doesn't play, there's no reason to believe the Ravens should be able to go into Green Bay and win with Tyler Huntley, except that Green Bay has lost a couple of weird games this year. So who knows? I still am on Green Bay minus 2.5 in hopes that it's Jordan Love on Sunday and he's clear-eyed enough to run the Green Bay offense the way we expect to see it run.
Tyler Huntley did come in that start. I believe it was the first game that Lamar had missed this year, and he handled the Bears. And this was a surging Bears team. I believe it snapped the Bears' first 4-game win streak.
It did.
And he was able to run that offense. The thing that gives me pause about the Ravens is the play calling. The Ravens scored with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter against the Patriots, and then Derrick Henry didn't touch the ball again. They ran Keaton Mitchell down the stretch of all people, and Harbaugh is on record saying, well, it was part of our running back rotation, and if we had gotten a first down, we would have gotten Derrick Henry back in.
Crazy.
He's Derrick freaking Henry. Why are you not icing the game out with him and giving
more
him
than any other running back?
100%.
He gets stronger in the fourth quarter. That's the whole thing about Derrick Henry. And if he's lost that, then I don't know. I feel completely differently about the Baltimore running game.
That being said, Baltimore is also in a kitchen sink game, but if the Steelers win and the Ravens lose this week, that's it. They're done. They don't have anything to play for in Week 18. So
if the Ravens lose or the Steelers win, it's
yes, 100%. And so I do think that they're going to be playing their heart out this weekend. I go back and forth. I think this one, 2.5 is actually really spot on. I think it's going to come down to it. And I'm actually inclined to take the Ravens here. I think the Ravens will get it done. And I think the Packers, it's going to come down to Week 18 for them and give the Lions that little glimmer of life.
Fair enough. If you are the coach of the Ravens, you're Jim Harbaugh.
John Harbaugh.
John Harbaugh, the other Harbaugh. Do you want them to show the Pittsburgh score in the stadium continuously at the end of each quarter, or not at all as your team plays that game?
Not at all. You play to win the game.
I agree. Sorry, fans.
I
I
mean,
don't want.
fans have phones. They know what they're
Yeah,
doing.
no, that's fair. That's fair.
Wi-Fi's come a long way. Do you remember being at Autzen when we were in college? And
Oh, your
man,
phone didn't work
yeah.
in any stadium. The second you walked in, it would just go dead, and you couldn't do anything with it.
Oh
You'd
yeah.
try and send photos or something like that to somebody who couldn't make it, and it just didn't work. So, all right, I'm on the Packers. You're on the Ravens. That moves us into the Sunday slate. I promised that we would talk about the Cards. And our first game in a very much dumpster fire of a series of games is the Cardinals +7 at the Cincinnati Bengals. And, who knows what Bengals team we're going to get here. It had seemed to me, at least, like Joe Burrow and company had checked out of this season, and then they go drop 45 in Miami last week. They definitely have the firepower to keep pace with anybody, and they'd have more than enough firepower to swamp a Cardinals team that is already underwater and seems to have given up on the season, having allowed 40 points in 2 of their last 3 games. I think Arizona traveling to cold Cincinnati doesn't bode well. Like, all of these signs point towards Bengals -7, except A, it's a lot of points, and B, what Bengals team are we going to get? All that said, I think I'm on the Bengals.
Hard for me to take anybody but the Bengals. I have to respect Jacoby Brissett and his ability to ball out, especially with Trey McBride finding production no matter what the score is, no matter what the game flow is. But the Bengals just seem pissed off last week. Chase Brown had 3 touchdowns, I believe, something like that. And it almost felt like Joe Burrow was out there just frustratingly trying to just get off the field and like, let's just get this done with. Let's go home. Let's try and steer ourselves to next year now that this dumpster fire of a year could be over. Give me the Bengals. We don't need to spend more time on this.
All right. In our next game, this game is fishier to me than Pike Place Market. You have the Steelers -3 at the Browns. And look, I know the Browns just hung with the Bills. The Bills only beat them 23-20. And it does seem like Shedeur Sanders is getting better. I don't know if he's a legitimate NFL starting quarterback yet, but credit to him, he's improving. That said, they lost Quinshon Judkins for the year, and he was the one real offensive glimmer that they've had this season. I don't like the Browns in this spot, even at home. When you look at the quarterbacks, and a lot can be told between 2 quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers has been a bit up and down, but Aaron Rodgers versus Shedeur, there's no question for me. When you look at the offensive lines and the running game, edge decidedly goes to the Steelers. Maybe DK Metcalf is another addition by subtraction, although the Steelers don't have a lot of talent at wide receiver. This might be a big Pat Freiermuth game. I don't understand why it's -3. I would have understood -4.5, -5.5, or -6.5. -3 just feels too low to me. Steelers are a cold weather team going and playing in a division rivalry game, and they do need to win, right? They have something to play for here. The Browns have nothing to play for. So I'm going to pinch my nose because of this fishy smell, and I'm going to take the Steelers -3.
What happens if the Ravens lose Saturday night and the Steelers have nothing to play for in week 17 and week 18? Do you think that changes the calculus at all? Because we know what Aaron Rodgers looks like when he gets hit. And Myles Garrett is 1 sack away from breaking the record.
He will get it here.
He's going to be coming after Rodgers. And this Browns defense has bottled up the run really well. So I don't see a world where Jalen Warren
and Kenneth Gainwell
really get it going. So it's going to come down. And oh yeah, by the way, there's no DK Metcalf. So who is Rodgers going to throw to? I'm talking myself into this, but give me the Browns here. I think that defense is going to do enough, and I think Rodgers is going to want to get out of there without any kind of injury, especially if, hey, this is all knotted up if Green Bay takes care of business the night before.
Look, I hadn't contemplated the fact that you've got Baltimore, Green Bay the prior day. That is an excellent point. I'm still going to take Pittsburgh, and I will say if Baltimore wins against Green Bay on Saturday, I'm going to feel pretty good about my Pittsburgh pick. If Baltimore loses, I am not going to feel good about that. But I'm glad that you can get to a point where you can pick the Browns. I can't pick the Browns here. I know
can't. That
if they had Quinshon Judkins and they had a better chance of maintaining a running game, I'd feel better about it. But I think they're on Jerome Ford as the
Dylan
backup.
Sampson is coming back in, and he had a bit of a glimmer early on the first couple weeks before Judkins had everything cleared out and was able to play. Um, he's seen some time throughout the year, but he is not the same talent level as Judkins for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. So in our next game, this is technically a dumpster fire game if you look at the records, but it's actually two teams that are arrow pointed a little bit up as we come to the end of the season. One team arrow pointed pretty well up. We've got the Saints, 2.5-point favorites at the Titans. You remember last week, the Saints were 6.5-point favorites. And man, we picked them. And I watched them go from 5-point favorites to 5.5-point favorites to 6.5-point favorites, and I didn't bet them. And then I kicked myself because they controlled that game last week. They looked really good. This is a 5-10 team that is playing with a 10-5 mindset. They are doing it in all phases of the game. And a lot of it comes down to rookie quarterback Tyler Shuck, the one-time Duck. And he has been tough. He's made great throws. He showed tremendous resiliency in the fourth quarter in games that have been tight. And he's won 3 in a row, including 2 against their division rival leading foes in the Bucks and then the Cardinals. So, I really
Panthers.
or the Bucks and then the Panthers, Carolina, Cardinals, Carolina. You know what I'm saying? I really like the Saints right now, and I like the Saints in this game. I feel like there is almost nobody more motivated, which is weird to say about a 5-10 team. But when you look at their 3-game win streak, it's not a fluke, and I think that win streak goes to 4 against fellow rookie Cam Ward. And what I think is a growing Titans team. I like the Titans. I just like the Saints a lot more right now.
I'm a big fan of the Saints right now. Kellen Moore is figuring it out as first-time head coaches do. Could Tyler Shuck have a run at Offensive Rookie of the Year? That's something that's bouncing around my head. Is that something I should go sprinkle a couple dollaroos on? It's been fascinating to watch this team, especially after losing Alvin Kamara and relying on Devin Neal down the stretch.
Who is now out, so they're going to have to make do with a hodgepodge at running back.
But they've still got Chris Olave. Their tight end has showed up in big ways down the stretch. And then, Taysom Hill is still that X Factor Swiss Army knife. Although he hasn't really been deployed in those gadget plays under Kellen Moore like I maybe would have thought we would have seen here and there. But yeah, give me the Saints. I'm with you on the Saints there.
John, interestingly, Tyler Shuck is actually second in terms of odds for Offensive Rookie of the Year right now. And I certainly think over the last 2 weeks, he can close that gap, especially if the person who is in pole position and his team falter. So Teteroa McMillan is actually the leader, and he's minus 280, which is a pretty healthy favorite right now. Tyler Shuck has the second best odds at plus 350. This is kind of interesting to me because when you think of MVP in the NFL, when you think of the Heisman Trophy in college, it almost always goes to a quarterback because more is asked of a quarterback than any other position on the field. And when you look at what Tyler Shuck has done, especially down the stretch, it's kind of wild to me that Tet McMillan is actually ahead of him by such a large degree. But I do think betting Shuck with 2 weeks to go, knowing that about quarterbacks, I'm sorry, there are going to be voters. If Tet McMillan goes down the stretch and averages 55 yards per game in the last 2 games, and the Buccaneers somehow come back and take the division from the Panthers, I could absolutely see this going Tyler Shuck's way.
Yeah, and Tet McMillan's last 4 games, 2 catches for 35 yards and a touchdown, 1 catch for 43 yards and a touchdown, 2 catches for 25 yards, no touchdowns. And then last week, 6 catches for 73 and 1. Like, he had kind of a down stretch, allowing Shuck to bridge that gap a little bit more. But I think if Shuck can go 2-0 to finish the season, and he looks pretty good, and the talk around him is this is the guy who was supposed to tank them into getting Fernando Mendoza, and instead he has, kind of figured it out as he's gone, put the team on his back and played his way into having another year next year. How do you not go for that guy, especially if the Panthers do not make the playoffs?
Yeah.
Which, hey, good luck against the Seahawks this week. That's going to be a tough test for Tet.
I was going to say, and Tet McMillan is going to see Spoon this weekend. Now, what happens with the injuries in the Seattle secondary. We'll get to all of that in a second, because I think that there are some big question marks for the Seahawks, and playing at Carolina isn't easy. But before we get to all that, we've got a decent game. We've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, 6.5-point favorites at the Indianapolis Colts. We've seen a really good defensive struggle from the Colts in taking the Seahawks all the way down to the wire in an 18-16 loss. And then we saw them in a shootout with the 49ers, just not quite able to keep up with what was a very high-powered 49ers offense. But then they did lose George Kittle to a low ankle sprain. And, you see that dimension go away, and the 49ers offense just isn't as scary. But a lot of the damage had already been done by then. Now, we've got a Jaguars team that is firing on all cylinders. They just stomped the Broncos, and it wasn't a fluke. Trevor Lawrence has looked great in partnership with Liam Cohen. Not only has he looked like the Trevor Lawrence we expected when he came out of college 5 years ago through the air, he's using his legs really intelligently, and he has a plethora of weapons. They have one of the best rushing attacks in the game today with Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin. When you look at the receiving options from Brian Thomas Jr. to Jacoby Myers to Parker Washington, maybe getting Travis Hunter back. You've got Brenton Strange at tight end. There is so much talent. There's no reason they can't cover 6.5 here. But I have a sneaking suspicion that the Colts, division rival, know how to play the Jaguars. Jonathan Taylor has had a pretty darn good season, even if he's had a couple of games where he struggled. I don't know, man. I think I like the Colts plus 6.5 at home to make this one a game that they lose, but I think make it a game. Where are you falling on this one?
That Broncos game just
shook you,
reinforces how good this offense is firing. I mean, you look historically, their low point was 17 points against the Texans in week 3, but then they haven't failed to put up at least 20 points. They've been scoring exceedingly well. And since getting Jacoby Myers, which looked like a nothing burger of a trade at the time, he just wanted out. They did just extend him, I believe, 3 years, $60 million. It looks like this offense is almost transformed into something else, where Jacoby Myers has been that complement that allows Brian Thomas Jr. to take off the top. And Travis Etienne has been a revelation this year, kind of hearkening back to a couple of years ago where he came out and just lit the world on fire. I really struggle to think this Indy defense from last week is now all of a sudden going to turn into a world-beating unit, and they're going to put the clamps on a Jags team that is firing on all cylinders like the best of them. Now, the flip side is, if Jonathan Taylor can activate tool time and really limit possessions, and they can grind out the clock, and they're not asking much of Phillip Rivers, because that's what it really comes down to. You can see when Phillip Rivers is asked to throw over 10 yards, he doesn't have the zip, he looks uncomfortable, and he just looks awkward throwing that ball. But if they can, push like a West Coast, just short throw offense on the back of Jonathan Taylor, like, there's an opportunity for them to find a game flow that matters. That being said, I don't know how much Phillip Rivers has got left. He's taking shots, and that body has to take time to recover at that age. But he also has little kids running around. He is a father with...
He's a big dude.
He is.
You look at him, he's a huge dude.
He is. And, he does bring that energy that you loved when he was a Charger back in San Diego, and he wants to be here. He's stoked to be here. So it's not like this is, some of the Aaron Rodgers plays that we've seen from earlier this year as well, where he's just dirting balls and he's just trying to get to the end of the game. That being said, give me the Jags.
I also think that he could win this game. I think it's not out of the realm of reasonability that he could have his one kind of moment. He didn't get it against Seattle. He didn't get it against San Francisco. I think he could get it here. But I think you're right. The safe bet is probably the Jaguars with the way that they're playing, but I just have a sneaking suspicion it's the Colts that cover this one. All right. we move into a game that has implications, but is not what I would call a good game. It's a battle for Florida. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 5.5-point favorites at the Miami Dolphins. Miami obviously coming off a stomping last week at home to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Buccaneers coming off of that first loss to the Panthers to fall to 7-8. And really, what a fall it's been for them. Where do you land on this one? 5.5 points is a lot of points for an offense that just has not been able to get on track.
The Dolphins are playing hard too. The problem is they're playing Quinn Ewers, right? I don't believe Tua's coming back
No,
in.
he's done for the year.
It gives Todd Bowles a chance to get right before they move on to next week. Even the Bengals were able to put the clamps on Quinn Ewers, and if the Bengals are able to stifle your offense, woo boy, that's just yeesh. The Bucks have a lot to play for, and the other crazy thing is if the Bucks lose this game, the Panthers this week doesn't matter for them.
It doesn't matter at all.
And obviously they'll both play at 1 o'clock Eastern time. There'll be that morning game if you're on the West Coast, that early afternoon game on the rest of the country. But I have to take the Bucks. This has to be a kitchen sink game. The Bucks also. The Panthers have the ability to clinch if they were to win, and the Dolphins were also to win. So there's a lot going on here. You have to win to keep your season alive, and I think the Bucks will find a way to get it done.
I do too. Give me Bucks minus 5.5. I don't feel great about the number of points that I have to lay there, but I do feel a lot better about the Bucks showing up and having a get right game here than I do about Miami and Quinn Ewers being able to challenge a decent Bucks defense. All right, we've got another game like this last one that has implications for the Patriots, who are 13.5-point favorites, but they're playing at the Jets. You and I have talked about this. The Patriots have to beat the Jets, and then they have to beat the Dolphins, and that will lock up the AFC East. I think they get the Jets here pretty easily. 13.5 points is a lot of points, but I've backed the Jets twice this year when there's been this many points on the hope that a stable Tyrod Taylor and a decent Jets defense could keep them in it. And they just suck. So give me the Patriots here minus 13.5. I think these AFC East teams always love to run up the score on each other. And I just don't see how the Jets don't even have Tyrod Taylor in this game. They're starting a guy named Max Brosmer 3. I think his government name is Brady Cook. And no, I can't tell you where he went to school because who the hell is Brady Cook? The Patriots should eat the Jets alive. They're going to score 24 to 27 points because they're playing good football. They need to get Henderson back. But even if he doesn't come back, Ramondre Stevenson can hold it down for a game. So give me the Patriots minus 13.5. And let's not think about this game too much. Where are you?
A lot of points, but I'm in that same way. I think the Patriots win this game huge. And I think Mike Vrabel's march towards Coach of the Year just continues getting stronger and stronger. Although, this is one of those where it's like fighting a toddler. There's no win-win here. If you lose, you lost to a toddler. If you won, great, you beat up a toddler. Good job.
Yeah, great job. All right, John, I've got one more dumpster fire game for you. We will spend very little time on this because it so does not matter. And then we will talk about the heavy hitters that close the day for us on Sunday, and we'll get into a Monday night game.
So it does matter. It matters for Fernando Mendoza because this is likely the game that determines where he will go.
That's fair. The 2-13 Giants go to the 2-13 Raiders. The Raiders are 1.5-point favorites. If you'd have told me that the Raiders would be 1.5-point favorites over anybody or any level of favorite the rest of the year, I would have said that you're a liar. But the Giants are equally depleted. I don't know if we're going to see Jackson Dart in this game. I do wonder, to your point on Fernando Mendoza, if the Giants get that pick, do they trade down? Because I'm not sure the Giants are ready to as we talked about with J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings being willing to look at another option in the first round. I'm not sure that the Giants are there. I think they would like to get him a new coach, and they would like to get him into a place where he's not putting himself in harm's way constantly. But I think the Raiders, you're absolutely right. And for all of the quarterbacks that the Raiders have drafted in the past and all of those kind of, silver and black, edgy type of personalities. Fernando Mendoza is exactly the opposite. And if you don't know anything about Fernando Mendoza, just go watch his Heisman Trophy acceptance speech. He's the kind of guy culturally that could turn around a locker room. We saw it happen in Seattle with Russell Wilson, and that act did wear out eventually. But at least in the early going, it really worked. He was somebody that was welcomed with open arms. He was very humble. It got to the point where, Marshawn Lynch said he tried to get a hold of Russell Wilson. He had to call the front office. They gave him a phone number for Russell. He called the number, and Russell had one of his people call him back. And Russell Wilson made a lot of mistakes that ruined the mystique of this humble guy who's a great teammate. Turns out he's not that. But I think Fernando Mendoza could very well be that. All reports coming out of Cal and then out of Indiana are that he's just a great guy, came up in a great family, really a wonderful teammate. That's what you want from your quarterback. He's also talented as hell. So I think you're right. I could really see this being the Raiders' pick if they do get the number 1 pick in the draft, or even number 2 or number 3. Maybe they move up for it because, outside of the Raiders and the Jets, there's nobody else that's quarterback desperate in this draft. At least nobody that's going to be high up in the lottery. I'm going to take the Giants here because the Raiders need Fernando Mendoza. And even though the Raiders played a decent game last week and hung in it by going to Brock Bowers, we said that's what would happen. If they were going to hang in that game, it was going to be through Brock Bowers. That's what happened. I think the Raiders might tell Brock Bowers to drop every ball he's thrown this week so that they can get that number 1 pick. They are so close. They're going to lose this game. That's the way this universe works. So give me the Giants plus 1.5.
The only reason that I push back against this is because I saw an interview with Max Crosby and they asked him about this. He said, I don't care about tanking. I don't care about draft. My job is to be the best defensive end in the world. And he's proven that out every single game this year. And he could be a game wrecker. I don't think Pete Carroll has it in him to lose is the problem
he's a dead
as
man
well.
Walking.
Yeah, so why
he's not
would
going to be back next year?
So why would he want to go lose this game and do the Raiders a solid?
I don't think he wants to lose the game, but when you're a dead man walking, I don't think you put the same energy into it as if you know that you're coming back the next year and you're still building towards something. And so I think that, that edge is important in the NFL. I'm not sure that the coaching staff is going to have quite the same edge. I don't think the players are going to have quite the same edge. So we'll see. I hear you on Max Crosby. I do not doubt his edge, but he had that edge against Denver. He's had that edge in every game. And you see how, you see how pissed off he's gotten at the Raiders' play. That hasn't stopped the Raiders from sucking. Okay, I'm good now. All right, John, let's get into the heavy hitters that close Sunday. We've got 2 afternoon games and then one heck of a Sunday night football game. Let's start with our beloved Seahawks, who are traveling to Carolina. They're 7-point favorites in Carolina coming off of. It's too many points, right?
It's too many points. The home Panthers are a thing. That's too many points.
The Panthers are 8-7, but they're 5-2 at home, and we've talked about them all year. Bryce Young, overall, he's like a stock, right? If you zoom in, you're going to see a lot of ups and downs, but overall, through the course of the season, that chart is green, and it's gone up and to the right. Ted McMillan, I think that he is going to be a handful for the Seahawks, but I do think they're going to be able to put clamps on him. Now, a lot of that depends on Nick Emenwari, who left the game with a concussion. I believe he will be back, but he has not cleared protocol yet. It is going to come down to Reek Wolin, who left the game, and then Kobe Bryant, who seems the least likely to be able to play next week. I believe he sprained his ankle. So, that Seahawks secondary is not going to be full strength. But that said, outside of Ted McMillan, it's kind of a mishmash for Carolina, and they made it work this year, but there's nobody that scares you. The Carolina defense has done enough to keep the Panthers in these games. I think Seattle's going to win this game. Seattle knows it needs to win this game. I don't think they're going to have a letdown after the Rams, but I also don't think it's going to be a 7-point game. I think this is going to be another game where we are thanking our lucky stars for the best kicker in the league, Jason Myers.
Mike McDonald is 13-2 on the road to begin his career.
That's incredible.
The dude is a freaking road warrior. And he continues time and time again to get this done. And he almost was 14-1, with that 61-yarder in SoFi this year. So I believe they will get it done. Weirdly, I think this is a big Charbonneau game. I don't think it's a big Ken Walker game. I think they score enough to get the ball across the line, but I think possessions are going to come at a premium. I think Carolina's going to run the hell out of the ball. And yeah, I agree that they're not going to cover the 7, but they'll get the dub, and that will set up an incredible tilt in week 18.
I also think that this game's going to go under. The total is 42.5 points, and I see this game being a 2017 type game. Maybe it gets to 23-17, 23-19, but I think it stays close, and I think it goes under. Our next big game of the afternoon is the Philadelphia Eagles, who really need to win. They've got the division locked up. But the Eagles know that they need to find a rhythm and keep it going if they're going to have success in the playoffs. And there is no city in America where the fans are putting more pressure on their winning football team than the Eagles. They go into Buffalo where they're taking on the Bills, and the Bills are only 1.5-point favorites in this game. And a big reason for that is the news of Josh Allen's foot injury. He's day-to-day, and I fully expect he will play. But for somebody who not only relies on his mobility just in general in the way he plays the game of football, but this year with the lack of talent he has around him, he's had to do more. He's had to buy more time. He's had to move around in the pocket more and scramble more and take off for 40-yard touchdowns. With a bum foot, that's going to be hard. And I don't think we're going to get anything close to honest information about the severity of his injury. I think he will go. But man, I like the Eagles in this game, and I think it's one of those games where they can make the Buffalo defense look normal and average and very mortal. And I just don't know that the Bills, especially with Jalen Carter back on the field, and I believe he is going to play, I don't know that the Bills are going to be able to contend with the Eagles if Josh Allen is anything less than fully healthy.
The Eagles are still technically in contention for the 1 seed. Really, they are competing with the NFC North to try and move into that 2 seed, because you would much rather play whoever's going to be the 7 seed than you would the Niners or the Rams or the Seahawks, if the Seahawks also do not win out. So they are heavily invested in winning this game, and the Bills start and end with Josh Allen. James Cook has been great, but James Cook is great because of the opportunities that Josh Allen opens up for him. I have a really tough time picking the Eagles this year to cover really anything with the state of their offense, with the state of their play calling, and their penchant for force-feeding one side of the ball or the other. But that Bills defense, they have not been world beaters. They've made some great halftime adjustments. Looking at that Pats game specifically, give me the Eagles. And I'm going to be at a Bills bar with my Bills buddy watching this, surrounded by fans. My son asked, can I come with you since it's the Eagles game? And I said, buddy, that's probably not a good idea.
Oh, man. He's
an Eagles fan.
He's an Eagles
Yeah.
fan. It's not a good idea.
Although Bills
Mafia,
fans, but Bills fans are actually...
They'll be pretty.
Like,
they would be
very
pretty
nice
cool about it, but I don't know how Nolan would feel at his age. It would be a little bit hard, I think, being the one Eagles fan and not really being able to cheer, and it would be an intimidating atmosphere for a kid that age.
Plus, he would get to halftime and be like, "Can we leave?"
You're like, "No, son." Like Dad did with us. No, we got 2 more hours of this. Just sit tight, as Dad would say, sonny boy.
100%.
All right. So it'll be interesting to see how that game breaks. That is a big one. As we talked about, the Patriots essentially have the AFC East locked up if they win these last 2 games. But if they stumble in either game and the Bills win out, they can still take the AFC East and potentially even move up further in the seeding. Now, we close Sunday night with a massive game. We have the Chicago Bears, who locked up their playoff spot last week but have not yet won the NFC North. and are still in contention for the 1 seed if things break their way. The Bears are going into San Francisco to take on this red-hot San Francisco offense, though a red-hot San Francisco offense who is hoping to get George Kittle back and have him be effective. San Francisco is -3 in this game. What do you think of San Francisco's chances of covering against the Bears?
The Bears have a very opportunistic defense. They are a bend, don't break style defense where they really rely on getting turnovers. They have a great rushing attack in Monangai and in Swift, but we saw with Jonathan Taylor that wasn't quite enough to dominate the game against San Francisco. And, you know, Caleb's been really frustrating to watch in the first half of these games. Yes, against the Packers in the first tilt that they had, he showed up big in the second half. In that last tilt, we obviously watched that fourth quarter magic and him getting the job done. It was an incredible performance, but against Kyle Shanahan, you have to play all 4 quarters to have a chance to win. George Kittle, we'll see if he shows up, but Christian McCaffrey by himself is a freaking handful. And even without George Kittle, Tunchis is still a pretty solid threat at tight end. Should have had a touchdown. I thought that was a touchdown personally. I was amazed they didn't review it. They obviously got the McCaffrey touchdown the next play. I really hope that the Bears can contend here. As a Seahawks fan, it would make next week a lot easier for us to breathe. I think if the Niners lose this game, they have significantly less to play for next week. I think they're out of the division, so maybe they don't take it as seriously. But hey, it's a division game. They probably will. But then also just like there's legitimacy here for the Bears, and I've used that word so many freaking times. And it's great that they beat the Packers, but it took overtime to beat Malik Willis. That's not good enough if you have aspirations to even win a playoff game and make a deep playoff run. So give me the Niners. I think it's going to be a cold reality check for the Bears. They're living high right now. And then it's going to come down to week 18 for the Bears to hold on to the division.
Yeah, fair. I think that's probably a good breakdown of how that game flow is likely to go. It could go a bunch of different ways. I think the one thing you didn't mention that I would add is that Rome Odunze, who is the best receiver in Chicago, he is going to be out another game. He suffered a stress fracture in his left foot. He's missed 3 straight games. You know, all reports out of Chicago are that he will be back and he will be able to help Chicago in its playoff run, but he will not be back this week. And I think that is going to make it tough because, you know, the Bears are probably going to get a takeaway or 2 from Brock Purdy, but the Niners are chucking the ball and they are aggressive as all get out. Christian McCaffrey is running the ball extremely well. I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on the Bears. And I think without Rome Odunze, the Bears are going to have a hard time keeping up with the Niners. So give me the Niners to win and give me the Niners to cover the 3. All right, John, we close the slate in week 17 with a bounce back game for the Rams, who are 7.5-point favorites in Atlanta against the Falcons. This Falcons team has been a total enigma this year. They're 6-9. You know, they've got plenty of talent. Bijan's still there. Drake London is back. Atlanta has not looked terrible lately. They're winners of 2 straight over Tampa Bay and Arizona, both on the road. That said, the Rams are going to be so pissed off after last week's game. And the last time we said that about the Rams was not that long ago. It was just a few weeks ago after they lost to Carolina on the road. We said they are going to be pissed off. They were 7.5-point favorites against the Cardinals on the road, and they stomped the Cardinals 45-17. I'm a little cringy in making the pick just because Atlanta has screwed me every which way. When I've supported them, when I've faded them, it didn't matter. But man, I'm going to take the Rams, and I might actually bet this one. I like, you know, I think the play in terms of teams that are trying to stay in it and have blowout potential, if you tie the Rams and the Lions together, or if you take the 2 of them and you even do like a 6-point teaser where all they basically have to do is win, I don't see any way either of those teams loses this week.
It's hard for me to move off of the Rams here. The Rams get 2 really nice tune-up games heading into the playoffs, but they don't have control of their own destiny, and that's got to be really frustrating. But it's anybody's game when it comes to these playoffs, especially in the NFC. They're going to come in and want to just force Atlanta to their knees. The problem is Atlanta's defense has been so frustrating this year.
Yeah.
Because like you said, some weeks they show up huge. Other weeks they just disappear. And you don't know what kind of defensive performance you're going to get. That being said, give me the Rams. Give me the Rams all day. I mean, even if it was 10 points, I'd take the Rams. I think the Rams are going to come in pissed. They're going to want to get right. And those poor Cardinals next week, they're going to be seeing something very similar.
I agree. All right, John, I got one more question for you before we break. I was having this conversation with my buddy Nate earlier. We were talking about the AFC and how this is one of the most wide open AFCs that we've seen in a long time. There is no Patrick Mahomes. There is no Joe Burrow. It looks like there is likely to be no Lamar Jackson. And even if he's there, doubtful he's going to be healthy. And yet, nobody has stepped in and really taken pole position in the AFC. We thought it was going to be Denver, but then they've dropped 2 straight. And so if you look at the odds in the AFC, Denver is still first in odds at plus 370. Right behind them are the Patriots at plus 380. We've talked about our concerns over how green the Patriots are and whether they can actually make a run all the way through the AFC and get to the Super Bowl without having any seasoning. The Bills are third at plus 400. Then you have the Jaguars at plus 500 and the Texans at plus 650. And I'll throw in the Chargers at plus 750. 6 options to choose from. Considering the odds, considering the situations in terms of seeding, where would you put $1,000 today?
$700 of it would go on the Bills. 200 of it would go on the Jags. 100 of it would go on the Chargers. And in this, I am betting on really talented quarterback. Like, I'm betting on the superhuman freak that is Josh Allen. And no Pat Mahomes. He has to be invigorated. That entire franchise has to be invigorated of this is their shot. Do not blow your shot. You can beat all of these teams. You have beaten several of these teams. With the Jags, we've seen how explosive this offense can be, but Liam Cohen, he's coached in some playoff games as the offensive coordinator in Tampa, but, they haven't really gotten the job done. We've seen Trevor Lawrence beat the Chargers once, but then he couldn't get past a shorthanded Chiefs team. Like, that feels like we see Trevor Lawrence of old show his face. And then the last one is just like, I'm sorry, but Harbaugh, I'm not going to bet against him. I want some action on Harbaugh, and he's got weapons in Herbert and a solid defense behind him, and Harbaugh knows how to win. Harbaugh was kind of the Kyle Shanahan before Kyle Shanahan, where he came out of nowhere with, and undersized is the wrong word, but that first Niners team he took to the NFC Championship game, they had no business being there except for Harbaugh.
Yeah. All right, but John, if you had to park it all in one team,
Bills.
all 1,000, it's
Bills.
the Bills at plus 400.
It's Josh Allen. I'm ride or die with the Bills Mafia this year. This is Josh Allen's shot. And I believe that they are going to get it done to lose their 5th Super Bowl to the Seahawks or the Rams.
All right, brother, thank you. This has been great. Let's keep the good picks rolling, and let's all have a great holiday. Thank you all for the time. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you all soon.
Happy holidays, y'all.
Bye.